Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Councillor Jeff Payne, and I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight to the Council's Planning and Consultation Committee meeting. And I'd like to advise that the meeting will be live streamed and recorded. The live stream and video recording will be made publicly available via YouTube and on Council's website. We have many submitters who are going to be speaking tonight, and I just wanted to speak to them. If you are in the waiting room now on Zoom, we know you're there. When you get the invite to come in, you'll see a blue button, and that's your cue to click that blue button and you'll be admitted into the live stream. So we have a lot of submitters to get through tonight. So be patient with us as we make this technology work. Nillumbik Shire Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners of the country on which Nillumbik is located and on which we meet. This land was never ceded, and its history never told. And I think it's important to pay our respects to all First Nations people, the elders past, present and emerging. As all councillors are here, there are no apologies to speak of. So we'll move on to the confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover for the confirmation of minutes, please? Thank you. Councillor Eyre, would you like to speak to the motion at all?
No, thank you.
No. Do we have a seconder for this as well? A seconder to confirm the minutes. Thank you, Mayor Perkins. I will now put the motion to a vote. All in favour? And that is carried unanimously. We move on to disclosure of conflicts of interest. Are there any councillors who wish to disclose a conflict of interest at this time? I will take that as a no, and we will move on to officers' reports. So the next report tonight is the Nillumbik Shire Council submission to the Melbourne Future Planning Framework. We have 3 submissions for this report. 2 should be appearing via Zoom, and 1 has requested that the chairperson read their submission, and each have 3 minutes. Now, we're hoping to admit Gilla Schnapp on behalf of Adjing Billy Proprietary Limited in person via Zoom. Gilla, I don't know if you are there, whether you can press *6 to mute or unmute in order to appear on the Zoom and read your submission. There is an ominous silence. Gilla, I don't know if you can hear us, to press *6 on your phone.
Sorry I don't see Gilla in the waiting room.
Okay, our speaker is having technical difficulties. All right, in that case, I'll proceed and I will read the 2 submissions that were submitted on behalf of Gilla Schnapp and Esther Caspi, and perhaps we'll speak to Gilla in person at the end of these presentations. We just got some notes that some people are not in the waiting room. We can just see all the councillors, okay, from John Dalton. All right, well, I'll leave Lynn and John. We have some time before we get round to them, but we can see that you're in the waiting room. All right, my first presentation is from Gilla Schnapp. She says, we ask for inclusion of the following key issues. All planning mapping mistakes, anomalies and irregularities that apply to the Green Wedge land be equitably corrected as a first priority. Without such action, the MFPF and MPS remain as flawed, incorrect documents. Net community benefit cannot justify continued failure to correct. Refer to the attached evidence examples A, C and D, indisputably proving beyond doubt land's true urban status and necessary inclusion with the UGB. To recognise necessary land use planning changes for the Green Wedge land east of Yan Yan Road in Diamond Creek, Plenty and Yarrambat, that is also part of the original Plenty Growth Corridor. To recognise, correct and return lands that were historically and legally within Melbourne's metropolitan urban boundary for infrastructure and or land use planning. To ensure land use planning strategies are put in place to allow fair and equitable utilisation of infrastructure by lands with established attached utility infrastructure. To recognise the impact of leapfrogging of development by neighbouring Whittlesea Shire and the Northern Growth Corridor on Nillumbik. Adjust integrated strategies of traffic, transport, land use planning accordingly. To adjust land use planning to mitigate the impacts of major road upgrades on vegetation clearance, fauna protection and bushfire management. To recognise tourism opportunities, agriculture and other innovative commercial opportunities to ensure economic development, land sustainability and jobs outside the boundaries of major activity centres and in Green Wedge land. to work with acreage landowners in partnership to achieve positive voluntary incentives for maintaining and supporting the green wedge. A variety of housing options, including density, to be considered in all areas of Nillumbik, not only in the activity centres. In Nillumbik, the 20-minute neighbourhood needs to include public transport, private transport and bicycle trails in major activity centres. To recognise and reinstate all pointed known main arterial and their collector roads in Nillumbik and to include as part of the transport links, public or private. And given the council officers had informed the draft stage 2 in 2017 and 3 in 2018, we asked council to request an extension of time to properly incorporate public feedback to the MPS, acreage landowners. Within this, to the MPPF, council submission is not due until the 24th of October. That is the first submission from Gilla Schnapp. At this point, I'll move straight on to, unless we have Gilla herself, who has managed to unmute. Unfortunately, I don't think we do. I will move on to Esther's presentation. And I think my time starts now. I have 3 minutes. So Esther, we asked council to include the following within their 2021-2025 council plan and interrelated plans: provide equity and fairness in all council planning decisions without bias or prejudice to any landowners; provide equal and direct access to the CEO, mayor, councillors, council officers and managers; there be a review of planning mistakes, anomalies and irregularities for correct and fair rectification; infrastructure irregularities must be openly and transparently reviewed to provide equity; promote innovative and creative land use sustainability options in rural and green wedge acreages regardless of zone; cooperation and partnership encouraged instead of mandatory decisions for acreage landowners; council make decisions regarding acreage landowners with equity, fairness, understanding, compassion and in good conscience; that choice and a variety of lot sizes is provided in the new housing strategy to enable more people to enjoy the green wedge and to accommodate new lifestyle aspirations brought about by the pandemic; provide a cohesive community and prevent community competition, friction and division; work fairly in collaboration and partnership with landowners forced to provide the green wedge; implement a soft urban edge in Diamond Creek, Plenty and Yarrambat as part of the above review; foster an inclusive community that does not disenfranchise anyone from their identity, suburb or township; lobbying of state government for a green wedge tax to subsidise land care, rates, maintenance, removal of weeds and other land care objectives; positive encouragement and incentives for enhancing the green wedge; removal of BOA constrictive provisions on land use for acreage land that limit land use sustainability; removal of unreasonable, costly and unnecessary land use permits for rural land; voluntary offsets to create and promote permanent pockets of conservation; ageing in place strategies to be adopted for acreage landowners; that agricultural uses not be limited to specific farming zones; all rural land should be able to exercise agricultural options; review inequitable and unfair decisions of past councils; ask for further consultation on this plan before it is adopted. So thank you. That is Esther Caspy's objection. At this stage, I'm looking to see if Gilla has been able to make the presentation in person, but it does not look like that is the case. So I assume that having read out both of these statements, we will have to move on. I've looked to the governance officer for an okay for this.
I don't have Gilla in the waiting room. Sorry.
Okay. All right. In that case, we'll apologise to Gilla that she couldn't come in. And at that stage, I will ask for a mover for the recommendation. Is there someone that could move this recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan.
Yes, I'd like to move that Council adopts Nillumbik Shire Council submission Melbourne Land Use Framework Plan in Attachment 2 to the Melbourne Future Planning Framework Plan and directs Council officers to formally lodge the adopted submission with DELP through its Engage website by the deadline of the 24th of October 2021, and 2, makes the adopted submission publicly available on Council's website.
Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Thank you. We have a seconder, Mayor Perkins, I should say. Councillor Ramcharan, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I think this is a really important project that the state government's working on, and I think they've done a really good job putting together the land use framework plan for the northern region. This is a really important plan in order to protect Nillumbik, protect the areas we love, protecting our green wedge from overdevelopment, sticking to the provisions we have in our planning scheme, such as no new subdivisions, no development on undersized lots, and also protecting our rural areas and the amenity we have there, and trying to get some controls in there to protect tree canopy. I think it was really good that the framework lists some strategic opportunities for Nillumbik, which I think we can be really excited about. And in the submission, we've said that we strongly support these objectives or these opportunities, and they include protecting the natural environment, particularly the flora and fauna links within the Yarra River corridor, retaining the Skyline Road and St Andrews land system for environmental conservation, protecting and supporting existing agricultural activities and soil, maintaining and enhancing Nillumbik's trail network, among a number of other things as well. So that's really positive that the state government is acknowledging that they are future opportunities for Nillumbik, and it'll be really good if we can get them into the final land use framework plan. The submission that Council's written talks to a range of important points. I think importantly, we've noted that the list of wildlife in the land use framework plan is maybe not as generous to Nillumbik as you'd hope it could be. We've got some incredible wildlife in Nillumbik, including the brush-tailed phascogale, the long-nosed bandicoot, and even lace monitor goanna lizards, which are an incredible thing to have in our shire. So something we should be boasting about, and the submission does talk to that. It also talks about the importance of a hard urban growth boundary and not allowing that urban growth boundary to be moved or encroached upon by buffer zones or soft areas, as some people may call them, so as we can really protect what we love about our green wedge and our open spaces and our bush. It addresses the issue of urban tree canopy and trying to increase the tree canopy in urban areas, including by looking at building envelopes and how we can make sure that all lots have space for trees on them in our urban areas. The other thing that our submission points out is that one thing that's really missing from the draft land use framework plan is environmentally sustainable design, which is a new concept in planning in Victoria, which a number of councils have adopted so far. And it talks to how we can put conditions on new buildings to make sure that they're developed in an environmentally sustainable way. So looking at materials that are used, looking at whether the buildings have renewable energy features such as solar panels, are they properly insulated to reduce reliance on heating and cooling, along with a range of other things as well. So our submission points out that that's really missing from this draft of the land use framework plan, and hopefully it's something that can be included going forwards, and hopefully something that the state government and council can work on getting into our planning scheme, so as we actually have some tools to make sure that new buildings in Nillumbik are up to scratch from an environmental perspective. So yeah, really happy with the submission that we've got. Officers have done a fantastic job putting it together, so thank you to officers for doing that, and happy to be supporting it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rantaran. Mayor Perkins, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you. Just very quickly, I think Councillor Rantaran summed it up very well, but just the community engagement side of it, the process is still open to all stakeholders and the wider public through the Engage Victoria website. And unfortunately, because of the timeframes given to council couldn't really capture our own community engagement. Council has a web page that's been created that identifies the project and directs the community to the Engage website for any inquiries or submissions. So yeah, it's unfortunate with these small timeframes that the council engagement wasn't able to be a bit more than it has been. But I'd like to thank Gilla and Esther anyway for their submissions and also the other submissions we've received. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Perkins. I would like to just reiterate thank you to the officers for all the work they put into this submission. We know we've got a quickly expanding shire next door, and that's going to put pressure on our waste management and urban growth boundary and all sorts of things. So it's something that we need to advocate for and look after. I will now put this motion to a vote. All in favour, please.
Would would I be able to speak first?
Oh,
before you
sorry,
do that?
sorry. My apologies. Any other councillors like to speak? My apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. I'd just like to reiterate what the Mayor just said, and in terms of encouraging people that might like to put in a submission to go directly to the state government. I do note that in the submissions that we received tonight, there was a request from both of them to extend the consultation timeframe for council, and with that not being a possibility tonight, I'm encouraging the submitters and other people that would like to have their voices heard to go directly to the state government to make their points known. And I think that's all I'd like to say. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Before I put it to the vote correctly this time. All right. Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And I think that is carried unanimously. For the remainder of the committee agenda items for the consultation and consideration tonight in the consultation matters portfolio. So at this stage, I'd like to transfer chairperson role to Councillor Rantaran to conclude the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Thanks, everyone. So I'll be continuing on with the rest of the items on today's agenda. So the next item is the draft domestic animal management plan that I believe most of the speakers here tonight are here for the hospital. That will be coming up next. So that's our final item on tonight's agenda. But we do have a number of speakers on the draft domestic animal management plan. So I'll begin by calling Lee O'Mahony to speak. I can only see one Lee in the waiting room, so I'm going to assume that that's you, Lee, and I'll just promote you to panelists. So you'll see a blue button on your screen. If you could just click the blue button, that'll let you into the meeting. There you are. So Lee, you'll need to turn your video on and unmute yourself. So there'll be a button at the bottom of your screen that you can use to unmute yourself. Yep, wonderful.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Lee. We can hear you. You've got 3 minutes, so you can start when you're ready.
Thank you. I care very much about our area and our wildlife. I've volunteered at Hillsville Sanctuary for more than 20 years, including at the Wildlife Hospital. I've also volunteered with Australia's expert in dog and cat management, who's Professor Jackie Rand. Based on research, I believe a 24-hour curfew won't achieve what people are anticipating. Firstly, the survey and the poll, just 0.4% of residents have said they unequivocally support a 24-hour curfew. This is not representative of our community. Many people with cats who I've spoken to aren't even aware it's being considered and were very concerned about it. Some are actually too scared to speak tonight because they know that there are many very vocal people who aren't positive toward cats. Secondly, costs. Animal management costs will significantly increase if this goes ahead because more cats will be surrendered and impounded. A common reason people seem to support a curfew is because of the perception that cats are impacting our wildlife populations. The good news is that not a single item of peer-reviewed research has shown that cats have any impact on wildlife populations in areas like ours. Hillsville Sanctuary's data has found that dogs harm 31% more wildlife than cats do. From other research, none of it has found that cats are impacting wildlife populations in areas like ours. Not tiny little nestlings, they actually protect nests from predation by black cats, not by black rats, not adult birds and not mammals. And one study found that antechinus, who are sort of tiny little mouse-sized marsupials, were present in greater numbers where cats were present than not. Researchers have found that cats mostly predate on animals who are compromised in some way, such as being old or injured or sick, who would have died from other causes. They concluded that cats don't cause more wildlife deaths than would occur otherwise. And I know this may be very surprising to many people, but things often aren't what we think they are. If cats are confined, people will use more mouse and rat poison than they already do because very few people are tolerant of mice and rats, and more wildlife will die from secondary poisoning after eating the mice and the rats. Some residents may not like a neighbour's cat visiting them, as is their right, just like some residents find the noise of a neighbour's barking dog coming onto their property annoying. But a state law already exists to address this. A 24-hour curfew won't do any more than can already be done about visiting cats. With respect to people, I believe this will have a very negative impact on many people. Not everyone can install a cat enclosure because they rent, or of the cost, or because there's no suitable space for one on their property. And I'm very, very concerned that this law, if it passes, will potentially lead to the suicide of vulnerable and isolated people and elderly people who depend on their cat for emotional support if their cat can't cope with confinement. Companion animals provide many health benefits, and it's been found, I've read research, that they're actually preventing the suicides of elderly people. So I urge councillors to please just pause on this, just let's take a step back, not include it in this stamp because it's not based on evidence, and I ask that the evidence and the likely outcomes are looked into in more depth. This will increase costs to all ratepayers due to more cats being impounded. It won't help wildlife overall, according to the research. It won't do any more than existing laws do. And very importantly, it could very well lead to people losing their lives.
Thank you, Lee. I will put you back into the waiting room now. Do any councillors have questions for Lee first? Sorry, Councillor Egan.
Yes, thank you, Lee, for your submission. I'm quite surprised by some of the stats there. Off the top of your head, do you know what the average just for a sort of a small to medium-sized cat enclosure would be?
It depends. It depends on the structure of the property and what's needed. My enclosure actually got hit by a neighbour's tree when it fell, and I've been told it would have cost between $8,000 and $10,000 to install it at today's costs. You can get sort of Avery sort of systems that are solid metal wire made by Better Pet Enclosures, but they're extremely basic. I'd say probably, it depends what the person wants for their cat. If they just want to be able to get fresh air, it's really.
I know it's a very difficult question. I was just sort of.
It is. Yeah. And depends on the space and everything. But like say people who rent, landlords probably, and I think what's Nillumbik renting? Is it 13% of people in Nillumbik rent? I think. Landlords probably aren't going to agree to it. The cost, it's just people say, well, they should install a cat enclosure or confine their cat, but the reality is that not everyone's got that luxury. And I know people don't believe this, but there are cats who won't cope. I've actually been contacted by a vet in New South Wales asking if I can help rehome a cat who won't cope as an inside-only cat. So we're going to see more cats being surrendered and impounded. I know that a lot of people don't care about cats. But it's tricky.
All right. Thanks very much for that, Lou.
Are there any other questions from councillors?
No, thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
We'll put you back into the waiting room now, and our next speaker is John De Alton, and I'm sorry, John, if I mispronounced that. So I'll promote you to a panelist, John. You'll just need to click the blue button on your screen in order to join the meeting. Great, John's here. So John, you'll just need to turn your video on and unmute yourself.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, you've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Firstly, a family would like to say a big thank you to all the councillors and council officers for your hard work, diligence and public service dealing with these complex issues. Yes, we do agree with night curfew for cats and microchipping and registration of vaccinations, but not with the 24/7 cat curfew without certain provisions. Firstly, mental health. Kind of like what Lee's already said, really, mental health is really important. And given that pet ownership has increased during COVID and helped people cope, grandfathering needs to be available for all pre-owned cats. So to introduce a 24/7 curfew, having to contain an animal that cannot be easily daylight contained can be extremely stressful for owners, especially older people, as evidenced by the experience of Knox area cat owners. Knox Council has mandated a 24/7 curfew without grandfathering, and many owners are very distressed and asking that it apply to new kittens only. Secondly, elderly may not be in a position to have the space physically to have a cat enclosure or can't afford it because of their financial position. So having to have their cats put down or impounded will be very stressful for them. And the ACT Minister for Transport recently said that grandfathering approach strikes the right balance and allows a fair and gradual transition. This is a response to community concerns around the potential negative impact of containing cats that have previously been allowed to roam. So obviously this relates to mental health, but also the well-being of the cats. And then secondly is mice control. I know not everyone lives near to some of the rural areas, but a lot of us, like we live near to Plenty River, where over 20 mice were killed by 2 cats last summer because they're very good pest controllers. They don't kill so much native animals, but they do kill those little mice. Mice plagues in neighbouring backyards have attracted a lot of eastern brown snakes into our gardens and along the street, even into our ceiling, and they eat the frogs and other wildlife. Foxes and feral cats actually are mainly to blame for eating the wildlife. We haven't seen much evidence of domestic cats killing animals in the street other than mice. In contrast, the use of outdoor poison baits for mice control leads to an increased raptor deaths as they consume the poison mice or the smaller animals that have already eaten the poison mice. So a recent study of the livers of 38 dead powerful owls found that mice poison in 37 out of the 38, 10% with levels high enough to outright kill those birds, and another 60% with levels high enough to impair their flying. So basically, cats are the best non-toxic vermin controllers we have, and we've asked council to consider controlling the mice plagues without poisons, and maybe by supporting vermin control permits for those homes who don't wish to use poisons in their backyards, because we do care about our native animals. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Are there any questions from councillors? Great, thanks, John. We'll send you back into the waiting room.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Julian Fralian. So Julian, you'll get that blue button again on your screen, and you just need to click that button to admit you to the waiting room, or sorry, to the speaking as a panelist, and then we'll be able to see you. Okay, Julian can't see the blue button. It should pop up on your screen shortly, Julian. Give it another minute or so. Can you see it yet? Ah, okay, looks like Julian's coming in. Hi, Julian. You'll just need to unmute yourself and turn your video on.
Yes, I've unmuted myself. I'm now trying to see. I'm not getting the control. There it is.
Oh, there you are.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry about that. No blue button appeared. I just ended up appearing in the meeting.
Oh.
So anyway.
Interesting. Well, you've got 3 minutes, so start when you're ready.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I found that the council approach overall to dog ownership and represented in the DAMP is somewhat anti-dog ownership in my view, and punitive and predicated on the belief that having dogs off-leash in particular is something to be avoided. And I was surprised that there's real sort of evidence of this. If we look at the council website and the report of the community consultation, the 2 top pieces of feedback appearing in the council website from the community consultation are that dog owners were not picking up excrement after their pets and that dogs were off leash when in on leash areas. And yet when I look at the community consultation report, those 2 points are listed at the top of a single question called undesirable dog behaviours, where people witnessed undesirable dog behaviours. However, what was completely ignored in that were all of the desirable dog behaviours, where in fact higher proportions of people reported that they saw dogs in public spaces who were well behaved and friendly, dog owners having their dog on leash when they were meant to, and dog owners picking up their poo. So overall, I felt this was a misrepresentation of what was said about dog ownership in the public consultation. I then had a look at what's happening in other councils, the neighbouring councils to Nillumbik. Nillumbik has 12 off-leash dog parks at the moment, with dogs required on lead in most places. Whittlesea has 8, planned to be 13 in 2026 by their policy. Yarra Ranges is on leash everywhere except dogs not permitted on sports fields. They have 24 off-leash dog areas. Sitting of Manningham has on leash except in off-leash areas, and they have 86 off-leash dog areas and parks. And Banyule, the neighbouring one, which is closest to where I live, has dogs off leash in any parks unless otherwise listed. And so it's really almost all parks. And I think the problem in the current approach in Nillumbik, there are a number of problems. Firstly, there's simply not enough off-leash dog areas. They're not easily accessible. They're too small. And the ones that are large are next to the river. So in the snake season, they're totally unusable. And I think that the opportunity, well, what that results in is that many people simply defy the rules. So if I go to many of the parks in Nillumbik that say they're on lead only, there are a lot of dogs running off lead because people have got nowhere else to go. And also there's no opportunity for the council to do really good education and to provide support mechanisms such as dog poo bag dispensers and signage and what have you. And I urge the council to look at neighbouring councils and see more positive approaches to dog ownership. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Julian. Right on time. Any questions from councillors? No questions. Great, thanks, Julian. We'll send you back into the waiting room. And our next speaker is Isabel Nolato. So Isabel, I believe you've done this before, but you'll get a blue button on your screen. And then if you just click the blue button, that'll allow you to join as a panelist so you can speak. So Isabel, I'm not sure if you've got that blue button on your screen yet. You just need to, okay, let me have a look. There we go. Isabel is in the meeting. Great, Isabel, so you'll just need to unmute yourself and turn your camera on.
Howdy.
Great, there you are. Oh, you vanished. Maybe try, I think, turn the camera on again. Great, there you are. All right, you've got 3 minutes and you can start when you're ready.
Okay, thanks. Firstly, I don't recall seeing a quick poll related to the proposed cat curfew and relied upon in the draft DAMP. I believe that the use of a quick poll for such an important issue is inappropriate and flawed. Now, a curfew is a regulation requiring individuals to remain indoors between specified hours, typically at night. It's normally short-term relating to danger or risks or with limited hours impacted. 24-hour confinement is akin to mandatory life imprisonment. Imagine if our curfew over the past 24 months had been 24 hours a day. Imagine asking dog owners, and I'm one of them, to keep their dog indoors 24 hours a day. What is the purpose of a cat curfew? What is the problem we're trying to solve? From the draft DAMP, state government sets standard requirements covering issues pertaining to people issues, training, ownership, registration, etc., and dog issues, attack, dangerous, restricted, menacing, but nothing explicitly on cats alone. From data provided by officers, 5 of the most common community issues identified through the survey: dog excrement, dogs off leash, cats outside after curfew, dog owners who are far away or absent, and barking dogs. Observing local Facebook groups and pages, the greatest number of complaints and posts are about dogs, barking, roaming, individual, pairs, groups, dogs, aggressive dogs that attack someone else's dogs, attacked a kangaroo or attacked a person. This isn't a dogs versus cats issue, but resources should be put into the issue, which can have a devastating effect on people, especially children and dogs and wildlife, and that's unrestrained dogs. There are very few posts on roaming cats. However, when an individual posts a comment about a cat on their property, there tends to be a number of very aggressive anti-cat comments. Cats have an image problem in the eyes of some individuals who don't like cats, especially not on their property because they may defecate or urinate in their garden, or the misbelief that cats have the greatest devastating effect killing wildlife. They absolutely can kill wildlife, as can dogs and foxes and humans. Research shows that the biggest impacts on our wildlife causing wildlife decline is human activity, land clearing, loss of biodiversity, cars, roads. Now, a cat out at night, which is a breach of our existing curfew, may make a nuisance, calling for a mate or aggressively fight if they find another law-breaking cat out. Annoying. But it is a people problem requiring education. We have a cat curfew, we have regulations around dogs. We need to focus our resources on educating the community and addressing specific issues, not bringing in draconian, ineffective regulations. There are benefits to keeping cats. There is research that proves what is best to do. Specific, meaningful actions. Here we go. Reduce the population by offering cat desexing programs. Don't go all draconian by sentencing cats to life imprisonment. Let's use modern day effective humane solutions. Vote no to 24-hour confinement. Vote 1 for cat desexing programs. And community education.
Well, are there any questions from councillors? Great, thanks Isabel. We'll send you back to the waiting room. And our next speaker is Freya Bramwell. So Freya, you'll see a blue button on your screen, and when you click the blue button, that will bring you into the room so we can see you. Great, there's Freya. So Freya, you'll just need to turn your video on and unmute yourself.
Hello.
Great. Hi.
Thank you so much.
Got 3 minutes.
Great. So there's a growing evidence base that shows that there's a strong connection between animal cruelty and family violence, and that perpetrators often use violence towards animals as a form of control and power over their partners and family members during their relationships and after separation. Many victims of family violence are reluctant to leave violent situations because they fear that their pets will be harmed, or because they're unable to take their animals with them into crisis accommodation. Given this, it's crucial that we ensure that animal management personnel have training in recognising and responding to family violence. And I strongly support the training for officers section in the DAMP, which includes reference to domestic violence awareness training. The current DAMP from 2017 includes family violence actions, such as a commitment to work with council's community services department to put in place relevant procedures to ensure an integrated approach when dealing with families at risk of family violence, and to investigate options for respite care for pets who are in situations of family violence. And I also made a commitment to ongoing work to encourage relevant council departments to advocate for accommodation for victims of violence that allows families and pets to stay together. And I would encourage council to consider expanding this 2021 DAMP to report back on what's been achieved in relation to those actions committed to in 2017, and also to carry forwards those which are still relevant. And I note that from the 2021 DAMP that the Pound offers free caring for dogs for up to 10 days or longer if required by community members facing family violence. And so I definitely applaud council for offering this service, and I just want to encourage the uptake of the policy, and particularly, I suppose, considering measures like translating resources or communication about the policy to the community into different languages, and also considering reporting in the plan how many people actually access the policy. And yeah, I noticed that there was a press release in 2018, and in the statistics in the plan, I think it says welfare cats and welfare dogs, and that there was about 8 or 9 back in 2018 that followed just after that press release, whereas here in 2021 there was 0 welfare dogs and 0 welfare cats. And I think that's a bit surprising, given that we know that COVID-19 might have led to a spike in cases of family violence. So I wonder if there's a bit of a problem with how the welfare pet policy is being promoted, and particularly if people are aware of the fact that it's something that's available to them. And I also think, like, including some networking with agencies who support clients with family violence, or consulting with the child and maternal health area of council might be worthwhile to consider how the DAMP could be expanded. Thank you.
Thanks, Freya. Right on time. Any questions from councillors?
I just thank you very much, Freya, for your perspective.
Great. Thanks, Freya. We'll send you back to the waiting room. And that is all of the speakers on the domestic animal management plan. We have one person who has written a submission for me to read out. So Stephen Veach, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, has written the following submission. I object to the 24-hour cat curfew as mooted in 7.3. Downside of 24-hour cat curfew. My cat came out of the bush around Big Pat's Creek east of Warburton. When confined inside for any time she has been for medical treatment, she attacks the carpets and curtains. I am unable to just accept this because I rent rather than own my unit. For the same reason, I am unable to make the modifications to install an indoor/outdoor cat run. Therefore, I need to surrender my cat for probable euthanasia, which council wishes to minimize. Elderly owners will find it just too hard to acquire a run. Others of various ages will find it too expensive. 7.1 of the draft plan notes support for a 24-hour cat curfew is stronger in the bushier areas. Perhaps a 24-hour curfew would be appropriate in high wildlife areas only. Perhaps cats microchipped prior to a declared commencement date would only be subject to the overnight curfew. Purported benefit of a 24-hour cat curfew. Strategic aims number 5 reads, in part, to encourage responsible pet ownership in order to protect the health and welfare of other animals and wildlife. A 24-hour curfew will undoubtedly reduce the number of attacks of cats on wildlife. However, it is unlikely that the number of individuals or biomass of wildlife in Nillumbik will significantly increase. It is unlikely that there will be overall lessening of anthropomorphic suffering of wildlife. No increase of wildlife in Nillumbik. There is a surplus of individual animals born each season. The amount of wildlife is determined by the amount of feed available. Therefore, in dry years, one sees news stories of starving kangaroos, and in wet years, the birds booming inland. Without predators such as cats or now the departed quolls, old and deceased individuals will linger. However, immature individuals will tend to starve. There are many studies to quantify the amount of wildlife killed by domestic pets, but none quantifying the net return of wildlife after the confinement of domestic pets. None are referenced in the consultation report. An English study in the New Scientist magazine said there was little difference, but I was unable to find it again. No lessening of anthropomorphic suffering. Certainly, less mature individuals will be taken. However, old and ill individual animals will linger and suffer. Even cuter young individuals will be more likely to starve, as both the healthy and ill-mature individuals will be consuming the available feed. And that is the submission from Stephen Veach. That concludes the submissions for the Domestic Animal Management Plan. So I will now look for a motion. Councillor Perkins.
Look, thanks very much, and thanks very much to the people who have made submissions. In terms of the proposed 24-hour cat curfew, the submissions that we've heard.
Sorry, Councillor Perkins, do you have a motion?
Oh, I do. I move the recommendation as listed in the papers. The committee acting under delegation from council and dot points 1 to 6.
Great. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Egan. Councillor Perkins.
Yes, just about the proposed 24-hour cat curfew. It's another example of something that I don't support. It's not why I was elected to council. It's not anything that anyone has come to me with of recent times. I know it's been a contentious issue over many years. Every new council, this tends to come up. It's never really been supported as a result of this consultation and also what I know as being an elected representative of Diamond Creek for many years. The 24-hour cat curfew proposal is not supported in the community that I represent. I certainly won't be supporting that going into the plan. At the next council meeting, I'd like that striked. And it's interesting that this sort of thing does tend to dominate discussions when it really shouldn't. it's a minor issue. The draft animal management plan is much more than about a 24-hour cat curfew. But apart from the suggestion of a 24-hour cat curfew, I think it is a good draft plan. We've heard from, particularly Lee and Isabel, certainly 100% support what they said tonight. I think they made their points really well. Cats are already legislated to be locked inside from 7:30 p.m. to 6 a.m. every night. That's current state government law. The problem that council has is the lack of enforcement officers really to enforce the current cat curfew, which is a nighttime curfew. So that's the thing that needs to be addressed before bringing more regulation, more restrictions on community and individuals, and as the submitter said, potentially harm their mental well-being. So just for the submitters who have spoken to tonight, take it as read that I certainly won't be supporting a 24-hour cat curfew into the damp. If it gets in there, I'll oppose it at every step throughout the process in terms of strategy, policy and implementation. I don't think it's a wise way to go. But apart from that, I think it's a good draft and look forward to the officer report that we'll see at the next council meeting. Hopefully I'll take the feedback from community, take the feedback from more than one councillor. I know it's probably a contentious issue amongst councillors, but I'm with the cat ladies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Councillor Egan, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Councillor Antran. I'm totally in agreement with Councillor Perkins, surprisingly enough. I'm with the cat ladies as well, even though I don't have any. I've got mini dachshunds. But I think now more than ever, the mental health issues that we're going to have to pick up and deal with post-COVID, this is just one small portion of, I suppose, a demographic, particularly in my ward, which is quite, I've got the oldest demographic in the whole of the Shire in Wattle Glen in my ward. And I know there's a lot of cats there. I agree with Councillor Perkins too about the issue about enforcement. And I think nothing against the new councillors, but that's a particular issue. The enforcement and the big stick mentality coming in as a new councillor, I think that's often, I suppose, a way that they go to try and do a whole lot of things, this being one of them. And I think, like that old adage, you succeed a lot more with sugar than vinegar. I think that applies. We've got to start educating people on some of the issues, not using the big stick mentality all the time. And I think this is just another one. And I agree with Councillor Perkins as well about, we don't even have the staff to enforce what we've got already. I'm not a current practicing wildlife carer, but I was and have been for over a decade. And one of the biggest incidences I ever had of secondary poisoning was there were 8 tawny frogmouths, and they were all poisoned from, baited mice. And it's on the front page of the Warrandyte Diary somewhere. But they all survived, luckily enough, but only because I got to them very early, or they were brought to me very early. But that was just one example of secondary poisoning. Owls particularly were the biggest, I suppose, casualty of that. And it's probably nothing much more to say, but yeah, I'll be saying a few more things when it comes up for voting. But the rest of the damp I think is great, but remove that one, and we've got to get away from this big stick mentality about penalising people all the time and threatening them. A little bit of education goes a long, long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Egan. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I hear and know that animals are like family and support positive mental health. And I know that through my own experience, but I do know that animals, that the number of pets have increased exponentially through COVID in particular. So I certainly hear the benefits of mental health and distraction and all the other things that come with it, with love and companionship. I also strongly support what Freya was saying around officers being trained in understanding family violence, and I am fairly sure that most officers are trained, but I think it's definitely a good point to check that the animal management officers also do have that in recognising and responding to, because they will find themselves in situations where they might need to read a situation and respond as well if they're being called out to an animal situation. I think it was great that children were able to participate in responding to the consultation too. There's some great images. And I just also want to say that I don't carry a big stick, as Councillor Egan may have professed. I'm not sure if she's saying that councillors were doing that or if officers were, but I don't carry a stick, but I hear your point. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Duffy.
Yes, just quickly, yes, I hope that the stick that we have is the one that we can throw so dogs can chase it and bring it back and have a little bit of fun. I agree with the other sentiments tonight, and I would like to thank the 6 speakers for their various perspectives. They've all come forward with very informative things that are important for us to make sure that we take it into our new plan. And, Karen talking about her experience with poison baits follows on from what Lee and John were saying. Julian talking about, the number of places that we have for dogs to run and roam. Even also talking about our need for more dog poo dispensers. Isabel talking about education, Freya domestic violence, and Stephen talking about, not wanting to euthanize our cats, etc. I think the key message from my listening to what people have had to say today is it is all about education and trying to provide how we can do things well rather than, putting things in a negative way. So let's keep this in a positive framework so that, we can enjoy our pets and enjoy the pleasure that they bring us and our community, and look at what council can do to improve the infrastructure to support healthy pet ownership in our shire. So I'd like to thank the submitters for what they've said tonight, and to the 523 people that filled out the survey, and the other 38 people who submitted their opinions in this community consultation as well.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Any other councillors? Councillor Payne.
Just quickly, I know that thank you to the officers for putting the DAMP together. I know that spelling has been criticised more than once. I just wanted to say that when they say venerable community members, I assume they mean vulnerable, I'm not sure. But clearly there has been a decrease in the number of dogs wandering. I think they mean wandering, but I'm happy to know that there are more certain dogs in the Shire. So thanks for the work, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Stockman? No? Look, I'll just speak briefly. I do think a cat curfew is something that's worth considering. It's something I still need more evidence on to make up my mind. But I think if you look at the over 500 people who filled in our survey for the domestic animal management plan, the vast majority of those people were in favour of a 24-hour cat curfew. So we've obviously had a subset of those people here tonight who've spoken against it. But I think it's important to note that a lot of the people who had their say in the survey were in favour. There is evidence. CSIRO has published a paper which is worth a read. It says that there is evidence that shows that pet cats are capable of driving declines in local populations of native wildlife species. And we need to broaden the discourse about cat impacts and management to include pets. So that's from CSIRO. It's the evidence isn't conclusive, and I do agree with the speakers on that, but I think there needs to be more research into it. And I think it's really clear if you if you look at the majority of people in Nillumbik, the people who move here come here because they love the wildlife and they want to be around it. And I think they would want council to do anything we can to protect that wildlife. So I do think it's worth considering, even if it's not the path we end up going down in the end. The other, on another topic under the domestic animal management plan, I also noted that a lot of the written submissions were pointed out that the plan excludes dogs from football ovals, which is something that we've considered for a number of reasons due to the damage that can be done to the oval and excrement being left on the oval as well. However, I do acknowledge that from many of the submissions that were made, and also from one of the speakers tonight, there aren't a lot of off-leash dog parks in Nillumbik, so it puts a bit of a burden on dog owners to exclude dogs from ovals altogether. There has been some discussion of whether we do it one by one, and you can exclude dogs from an oval when there is an off-leash dog park nearby, and perhaps that's something we should consider moving forwards before we pass the plan, whether we want to lighten up on that one a little bit in order to have some leeway for dog owners who don't have an off-leash dog park nearby. Okay, so that's everything I had to say. I'd like to thank all of the speakers on behalf of councillors. And I will now put the matter to a vote. So those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Which brings us to our final item for tonight, the big one, Eltham Area Community Hospital. We have a lot of people registered to speak. So thank you all for coming along tonight. I'm going to try and keep things quite tight. So councillors have all agreed that we will ask questions, but only if we have a point that we want to clarify or more information that we feel was missed in your submission. But we will be avoiding questions as much as we can, just because we need to get to everyone and we don't want people to be sitting in the waiting room for too long. So please be ready to come in. You'll see a blue button on your screen when it's your turn to speak, and just click the blue button, come in, turn your microphone and video on, and we'll give you each 3 minutes. I will begin running through the list of speakers, and our first speaker is Margaret McKenzie. So Margaret, you'll see the blue button on your screen. If you could just click that button. And okay, I think you're coming in. Great, there you are. So you just need to turn your microphone and video on. And great, there you are. Okay, you've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Oh, I'm there. Oh, okay. I'm against the hospital in Civic Drive Parklands. The obvious problems are parking, paid parking, where to park, one road in, one road out, traffic congestion, bad location, no room to expand for our future needs, and it will become a white elephant. No accessible public transport for the sick or just someone unfit who doesn't have access to a car. The closest bus stop is 400 to 500 metres away, and would mean walking across 10 lanes of busy roadways is just ridiculous. And that's only part of the trip. You have to get to the bus stop. I am a cancer survivor treated at the Austin, and my friends who didn't have access to a car were very grateful and much in need of a train station across the road and a bus stop just outside, as most hospitals have. I support drug and alcohol and mental health counselling and needle exchange. And it's not up to me to tell a hospital what services to provide, but in the back blocks of a park where children play and 17 townhouses just a stone's throw away is the wrong location, with a hospital staying open late into the evening. From the Freedom of Information documents, Apollo Parkways was never the right choice and didn't meet VHBA's own criteria. These details raise more questions than answers and should be investigated. We have Vicky Ward stating in Parliament to exclude Eltham Main Street as she wanted to build a basketball court, and in my letter she wanted to save a preschool. VHBA didn't do their homework if the majority of Eltham sites selected are flood prone. I would like to say I'm not against a hospital, no one is, but it has to be in the right location. I would have thought a hospital was needed further out, as Apollo Parkways is surrounded and close to many hospitals: Austin, Mercy, Warringal, Heidelberg, Repat, Latrobe, North Park and the Northern Hospital. I fought with Friends of Apollo Parkways to save the land behind the library in Whittycam Terrace, but only saved the land which was zoned the highest level public park and recreation zone, with Vicky Ward turning over the soil only 2 years ago. The parklands was always thought to be extended when grants and funds or donations were provided, but this will not happen if a hospital is built on the land. It is the only bit of flat ground in the parklands for seniors with their bad knees and people with mobility issues and kids wanting to play cricket, footy or just ride their bikes. I visit the Diamond Creek, Eltham and their vast surrounding parklands, and I have a vision for a polar parkways, of course on a smaller scale. I pay the same rates and agree to share my contribution, but it has to be equitable. It is our only real park for our community to use, and the hospital could be built elsewhere and not in someone else's park. The whole of Nillumbik will use this facility, and it is too big of a sacrifice for one community to wear the brunt. With COVID, our community will need more open spaces more than ever.
Great, thanks, Margaret.
Thank you.
Any questions from councillors?
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. We'll send you back to the waiting room and we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Carol Doherty. So, Carol, you will see the blue button on your screen. And if you just click that blue button, then that'll admit you as a speaker. Great, there you are. So you'll just need to turn your video on and unmute yourself. Great, there you are. So you've got 3 minutes, whenever you're ready.
I can't see myself.
Oh, we can see you.
Oh, there I am. Okay. Yeah, okay. All right. A day hospital for the Eltham electorate will be a great asset for the community. However, it must be built in the right location now and into the future. The selection by VHBA of the Civic Drive car park and Southern Parkland at Apollo Parkways, Greensborough, is an enormous mistake. The preliminary land identification documents, May 2019, and viewed under FOI, lists 8 options, and this selected part of Civic Precinct is not one of those 8. The number 1 option of Main Road Eltham ticked all the boxes. The number 4 option of Nillumbik Council Facilities Complex was the whole site, including the Shire offices, the library, the sports centre and the parks. The Community Consultative Committee, chaired by Vicky Ward, provided outcomes and recommendations that were Eltham focused, that is, must have Eltham character. Throughout 2020, it was assumed the hospital would be in Eltham. Then suddenly, in February 2021, Vicky Ward fronts State Parliament and requests that the Minister for Health rules out the Main Road Eltham site for the community hospital. And I'll quote from Hansard. As one current proposal for the land is to create outdoor 3x3 basketball courts, which could also be used as a community performance space as well as local markets. Keeping this land as open space with a community purpose is especially important for my community. End of quotes. Hello, what about our community space? What about our basketball courts? Don't they matter? In early 2021, it would appear a working group was formed between the VHBA and the Shire Council to quickly come up with an alternative site. The preferred site of Civic Drive Amphitheatre land was initially selected, and this site was walked back to the car park and Southern Passive Parkland after negotiations. We have no evidence that any due diligence was done for this site. We have no evidence that any traffic modelling was ever done for this site. Did VHBA meet with stakeholders, library and sports centre prior to their decision? Did they understand the massive problems with parking, heavy traffic, no public transport, close proximity to residential housing, lack of walkability, and the destroying of public open space? We have no evidence they did. What we do know is for certain that they did not consult or meet with the local community, and we stand to lose the most. So councillors, you now have the enormous responsibility
Carol.
of voting.
Thanks, Carol. That's time. If you've just got a couple sentences left, I'll let you finish up.
Okay, you now have the enormous responsibility of voting for this parkland, and you must feel that you've been given all the evidence necessary for a well-informed decision, and you are comfortable and confident with making that decision. You must not sell the land.
Thanks, Carol. Any questions from councillors? Great, thanks, Carol. We'll send you back into the waiting room. And the next speaker is Lynn de Alton. So Lynn, same thing, you'll see the blue button on your screen. You'll just need to click that blue button and that'll admit you to the meeting.
While Lynn's coming, I'll just say I'm reading your signs there, Carol, in the background.
Hi, Lynn. You're in the room, so you'll just need to... Great, there you are.
Done. Great.
Wonderful.
Thanks, guys, for
2 minutes.
listening. There is a third choice I'll bring our attention to. It's not just sell or compulsory acquisition, and I'd like to call it the Austin Health Community Hospital, because the Austin's going to be running it. The HBA can also find a site that is a sole medical purpose or use other than Civic Drive. Before you vote October 26, could I ask you to look over the Austin Health Strategy and Vision Plan and their executive staff and board? They have over 8,500 staff on their 3 health campuses, and they'll be running this one. Their clear vision is to support people to keep healthy and out of hospital. I've examined hundreds of pages of documents and maps, and I make the following observations. The HBA hasn't ever before initiated a co-location of health with recreational facility. They haven't done it before. They don't have any experience. Neither do the Austin for our community hospital site, and neither does the Monash Health, because the Casey Cranbourne complex has also been chosen. They're sports facilities as a location as well. And I haven't actually been able to find any health site in Australia or the world. There may be one, but I haven't been able to find one where there is co-location of health and recreational facilities. So why isn't there these co-locations? It's because healthcare facilities by nature are always sole medical purpose, sole medical use, centred on excellent patient care. So around the world, co-location only ever occurs hospital with hospital, hospital with private hospital, medical schools, or commercial imaging and medical businesses. So at our site, a diabetic patient will always trump a gym user, and a dialysis patient will always trump basketballers every time, and rightfully so. And Austin Health Community Hospital will always be the facility, if it is located there, that will have the most power in our already well-used precinct. Hence the need for a hospital site to be single purpose and not dual purpose. The Austin is very clear about its function, vision, responsibilities and boundaries, and they end at the border of the car park and the purchased land. Anything beyond that is not our responsibility or problem, because they're very clear about excellent patient care. So council will be forever having to navigate all the ongoing costs and management problems, not enough parking, the bottlenecks. So how much time and energy will the councillors and staff be required to...
That's time, if you'd just like to wrap up.
Yeah, manage the Parkway, Apollo Parkway site. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions from councillors? Great, thanks, Lynn. I believe you're now speaking again on behalf of Lena, is that right?
Yep.
Great, I'll let you read out Lena's submission.
I also ask you to look at VHBA's Health Planning and Development Master Planning document. As there's 10 community hospitals being built, it's unlikely they'll be simultaneously operating in 2024. And as the Fisherman's Bend site has not yet been identified, there's no hurry for the Eltham site to be found if they decide to find a new site with a single medical purpose. Increasing active living is a key target of all health and wellbeing plans. The Victorian government, through Get Active Kids, is providing 100,000 vouchers of $200 each, that's $20 million, over 2 years from November 2020 to help disadvantaged kids participate in over 90 sports and activities around Victoria. Apollo Parkways already has a vibrant and thriving heart, with over 6,000 basketball members, gym users, which provides a revenue stream for council and to support council's own financial plan. Hundreds of families come long distances for our PPRZ, playground, library, etc. And in the master plan of VHBA, economic benefits need to be identified, like the creation of the potential for commercial gains through the provision of space that's attractive to other users and commercial providers. The site should consider opportunities for compatible commercial or private health service delivery to provide an income stream for the health service, which is why there's paid car parking everywhere. Master planning also says that relevant local planning schemes need to be viewed in terms of proposed future developments so that there's appropriate linkages between the health service campus and adjoining properties and users, including parklands and other amenities. The Casey Cranbourne complex, with over 12,000 members alone in basketball and netball, are facing the same problem, with VHBA choosing land right next to their 20,000 square metre, 10-court indoor sports centre. And with over $20 million being spent on our upgrades and over $22 million spent on their upgrades, VHBA needs to find a better site that isn't dual purpose. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lynn. We can't do questions for that second part.
Yeah.
Speaking on behalf of Lena.
Yeah.
So we'll send you back to the waiting room. And our next speaker is Svetlana Rizik. So Svetlana, there you are. Wonderful. Didn't even have to give the instructions. So you'll just need to turn your video on and unmute yourself, and you're ready to go. So if you're there, Svetlana, just unmute yourself and turn your video on.
And also I need to put video on, but yeah, just a second.
Sure. There you are. Wonderful.
There you are. Right. Long time no see. Do you want me to present on behalf of Friends of Apollo Parkways first, or my own submission first? What would you prefer?
Up to you, but let us know, because we'll only be able to ask you questions for the one you're presenting for yourself. So,
okay, so Friends of Apollo Parkways, on behalf of the group, you won't be asking any questions?
That's right, yeah.
So let's put it first, so you then, if you do have questions. But before I start presenting, can I just humbly say thank you for your time. You've spent so much time with us over the past 2.5 months. It's really commendable. It has never happened before in community consultation, and I do bow to you for your contribution to the process and to actually talking to us and finding out more, and we learned a lot together. So thank you. Thank you before I start.
So thank you. Well, you've got 3 minutes.
Yeah, let's start.
Thank you, Svetlana. It's been a long 11 years.
Yeah. No, Peter, yes. Long 11 years, and have we always been on the same side of barricade? No. But have we respected each other? Yes. True, yeah.
Yep.
All right, so let's start. Our group was formed in 2007 to protect open space in Apollo Parkways. We've been working with the council for these years to make the community improvements possible. Now, together with the council, we are facing the biggest challenge ever, the parkland being taken away for Eltham Hospital. Ever since finding out about this shocking proposal, we have been working tirelessly to make sure that it doesn't go ahead. We have started a petition, delivered thousands of flyers, spent hours in meetings with you and Carl and VHBA and Vicky Ward, and the Nillumbik and wider community responded with 1,555 signatures under the petition. That was not reflected in the report. 1,400 responses to VHBA survey, 170 people came to their session, and more than 1,000 responded to your survey and 42 submissions. We were also having articles in Herald Sun and Warrandyte Diary. We have done all of this to help you to say no to the HBA to build Eltham Hospital in Civic Drive, Greensboro. We love hospitals, but the chosen location is totally wrong. It will disadvantage patients with mobility issues and vulnerable members of our community. There is unsafe and unwalkable access to the site from existing bus stops. The HBA is unable to address the issue. Their comment, hopefully most people have cars, is a smack in the face to health equity and shows a lack of understanding of social determinants of health. Once Eltham Hospital is built, lack of public transport, congestion, insufficient parking and parking restrictions, inaccessible community facilities, fire danger, all of these unresolved issues will become a nightmare for the council, hospitals, patients and staff, precinct users, and foremost, the residents of Apollo Parkways. The process the HBA are following only works if they choose the right side from the very beginning. If they didn't, then they're in big trouble. They have no track record or experience in building a community hospital where the site is not a sole medical use. The experiment has yielded negative results that they won't stop the process unless Nillumbik councillors stand up to them and refuse to sell Apollo Parklands. Our green space is newly flat, irrigated, grassed over and zoned public park and recreation. The community and the council worked hard for years to get to this point, and we have never yet had a chance to enjoy it properly with COVID lockdowns. Let's save it together and let's help the HBA to find an appropriate site for the hospital. That's the first one.
Thanks, Ilana. Almost bang on time. And I'll let you run straight into the next one.
Can I bring it up, please? I had
Yeah, sure.
and I swallowed some of my presentation because it accidentally switched between two different documents when I swiped it. So I was like, oh, improvise, find it. Okay, I'm ready to go for my own.
Great. So this one's on behalf of yourself.
Many people have already told about congestion and everything like that. I'll focus on just one issue and then have a conclusion. Let's start the timer.
Great, go for it. 3 minutes.
Apollo Parkways is classed as a high fire danger zone due to our proximity to Plenty River Gorge. The HBA have not addressed the issues of fire safety for the hospital and the area. In Victoria, we've had 8 large, over 125,000 hectares each fires since 2000. Due to climate change, the fire seasons are growing progressively longer with implications to natural and human habitat. Apollo Parklands are the place of last resort and staging grounds for CFA. Eltham Hospital will reduce both of them, and hospital-induced overcrowding of the precinct will pose a risk to human life. In July, I asked Diane Lever whether Eltham Hospital will be closed on cold red days. She said she didn't know the answer. She'll get back to me. 2.5 months later, there is still no answer. That's not good enough for the neighborhood that had to evacuate during the fires on 30th of December 2019. Large fire hydrant water storage tanks have been erected in front of Sports Centre. They obstruct the view on the renovated building and look completely out of place. Obviously, they are a must, otherwise they won't be there. The HBA have been extremely vague on details of infrastructure for Eltham Hospital. Are they expecting our council to donate the land for the hospital's fire tanks? Will the tanks go on the amphitheatre or wetlands? No answer. I'm not objecting to the hospital in principle, but selected location is completely inappropriate, neither now nor in the long run. It is irresponsible of VHBA to have not approached Daniel for the sites. It is disrespectful of them to demand the parkland from the council under the threat of CA. Our park was never offered as a potential site. It was the current Shire offices building that was placed on the list by one particular councillor and council officers. No council motion was passed and there was no trace of discussion being held regarding nomination of sites. Therefore, the current council doesn't have to appease the HBA. Nillumbik is not a shire that allows public park and recreation zone land to be taken for development. If some councillors are entertaining the idea that by selling the park and Apollo Parkways, they will protect the old Eltham Shire site, they need to think twice. Long term, it won't stand a chance once the floodgates are opened for the park grab by the state government. So decisive no to the sale of council-owned open space is what's needed. If VHBA moves on, you would have saved not just the park, but the entire precinct and neighborhood. If VHBA persists in taking the land, the council legal fees will be paid. That would be the worst case scenario, which we will continue to challenge, making the land unavailable to be acquired in a timely manner. And we will win, regardless of what they do, we will still win. That's it, done. Thank you for listening and thank you for having me. I really enjoyed time with you guys.
You're bang on time. Now we can ask you questions for that one. So are there any questions from councillors? No questions, great. Thanks, Svetlana. We'll send you back into the waiting room.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Kelly Farrow. So Kelly, will bring you in. Great, there you are. So you'll just need to unmute yourself and turn your video on. Fantastic.
Yep, can you see me?
Yep, we can. So whenever you're ready, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm asking councillors not to sell our land on Civic Drive for the Eltham Hospital. I live in Apollo Parkways and I think community hospitals are a good model. With 2 small children, I will likely use it sometimes. However, I'm also a policy professional who believes public decisions on infrastructure should be made with good evidence, foresight and fairness. To vote to put the Eltham Hospital on Civic Drive, Greensborough, would devastate my community's quality of life and produce a hospital that isn't easy to get to without a car, causes traffic and pollution, removes precious green space, destroys our main community gathering and recreational area, and isn't backed up by good evidence, process or planning. I know councillors must act in all of Nillumbik's best interests. Having seen the results of the council survey, I believe your decision should be easier. The survey showed that while people want a community hospital in the Eltham-Nillumbik area, the vast majority of Nillumbik respondents clearly do not want it on Civic Drive. 61% of respondents opposed or strongly opposed the Civic Drive proposal, with hundreds of people voicing shock, concern, anger and desperation clearly in the written comments. Fewer than 80 people out of more than 1,000 respondents actually supported the Civic Drive site. That's less than 10% of respondents. The other 25% of supporters of the proposal generally just like the idea of a hospital nearby. Even once weighted to support suburb populations, the overwhelming majority of Nillumbik respondents oppose the hospital in this location. These council survey results alone justify a vote of no. But additionally, the issues raised by hundreds of people justify a further vote of no. Those issues can't be fixed by any amount of mythical future funding or VHBA spin. This council has got nothing before it to suggest the legitimate issues can be fixed around parking, traffic congestion, public transport or child safety. They can't be improved or made conditional to the sale. Once our green space and big bird sheltering trees are gone, they are gone. What's left will be loomed over by a multi-storey hospital with expansion already planned. Council will have no control over its own doorstep. Stefano Scalzo loves that families playing on the sloped grass and the Rainbow Snake playground will be, quote, watched over by the patients. But we are not trees or flowers or therapeutic fodder for the health network. We are residents and our open recreational and green space is just as important as other suburbs. This hospital location is not a situation of the needs of the many must outweigh the needs of the few. In this case, the needs of the many can be met without destroying the amenity and locality of the few. Voting no against the land sale will not be a vote against the hospital. The VHBA has the resources to find another better spot. They can also go by way of compulsory acquisition, which would result in a fair and regulated transaction price for the Nillumbik Council. For councillors, taking account of the strong community opposition in the survey and the obvious insurmountable negative impacts for the local community, there is nothing to lose by voting no. And I really do hope that this vote is on the table. That was my part.
Thanks, Kelly. That was bang on time. Now we can ask you questions for this part. So are there any questions from councillors? No questions. And I believe you're now speaking on behalf of Richard Williamson.
Yes, he would like to speak about the process.
Great. Well,
the open space to be sold. Sorry.
Go for it. 3 minutes, whenever you're ready.
The open space to be sold for the hospital was promised to us and zoned by this very council, differently constituted, as a community space for park and recreational use. This is reflected in the Civic Drive master plan. We know the Victorian government doesn't care about the PPRZ zoning, but council should. The outcry and tension about the hospital proposal is what happens when there is poor planning and vested interests at play. The original nomination of Civic Drive occurred in 2019, and at that time it offered very few of the attributes requested. The nomination, as other speakers have said, was done by one former councillor, and those whose wards were affected were not even consulted. Over 2019 and 2020, the preferred and publicly stated site for the Eltham Hospital was in Eltham, but it was suddenly whisked off the table by Vicky Ward's political intervention earlier this year. To me, this was not a fair or reasonable intervention that served all of her Eltham constituents equally. Now, 2.5 years later, a different Nillumbik council is being pushed by the corner-cutting VHBA to sell this inappropriate site location. But with the passing of time, there are different private properties now available, and the City of Banyule may have options. The VHBA should do the work to find a new location that is more appropriate. But from FOI documents released to me today, we have seen VHBA correspondence to Council with the planned timeline for each step, in which community consultation is just a token threshold, a ticked box on the way to the inevitable land transaction in November. I ask you, Nillumbik councillors, and especially my Blue Lake Ward representative, Richard, please do not let this happen. The council survey results show this can't be a done deal. The poor process so far has left so many stones unturned and many people in distress. A no vote must be on the table. Unlike other suburbs, we don't have plenty of beautiful green recreational spaces to choose from. The small roads that will be consumed by the hospital are our main ways into and out of our home suburb. We will be dogged by the flow and impacts of the hospital for years, and there is no evidence before anyone to suggest that is not the case. Parking changes on residential streets, rat running, paid parking at the library and play park, and more congestion. I've even seen mention in some of the paperwork under FOI of moving the library away from the Civic Drive precinct to give room to the hospital expansion. What a disaster that would be. But you don't have to sell. The hospital will be built, and it shouldn't be built in Civic Drive, Greensborough. This is a residential area and the negative impacts are too great. To vote to sell this land would be the ultimate rejection of the years of hard work and good faith engagement by the local community on improving the Civic Drive precinct. Apollo Parkways and precinct user feel deeply diminished and disregarded by this proposal, as if our modest enjoyment of life and open space in our unique community is a minor inconvenience in light of bigger vested interests. I ask that you stand up for us, for the environment, for smart and green health infrastructure, for equality of accessibility and fairness, and for good public process by voting no. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Right on time again. So we can't do questions for that one. So we'll send you back to the waiting room. And the next speaker is Grant Brooker. So Grant, we will promote you to a panelist. Remember to click that blue button. Great, there you are. And just unmute yourself and turn your video on. There you are. Wonderful. And you've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Okay. Righto. Councillors come and councillors go, but their decisions can at times last forever, and this is one of those times. With this project, councillors need to internalise the fact that if you break it, you own it. All negative impacts from a decision to sell will be blamed on you. Fairly or unfairly, the people who make the decisions have to own the consequences, including the unintended or unanticipated ones. The council survey. Councillors should not just look at the raw numbers and conclude that 35% of respondents supported Civic Drive. As many as 23% of respondents, according to the Metropolis summary, did not support Civic Drive. They supported a hospital because it was needed, page 12. The council survey question asked them specifically, how supportive are you of the current proposal, and please specify your reasons. Answering because it is needed does not address the question of the Civic Drive site. It is in fact a generic statement of support for hospitals. FOAP have never questioned need, it has questioned location. 48 people who also supported the site did not or could not give any reasons for that support. It could have been the site, or it could have been simply generic support for a hospital. It is impossible to know. By contrast, all but one survey respondent gave reasons for their opposition. As few as 80 of 334 respondents of those supporting the hospital did so for its location. Councillors must also separate the issues of generic support for the hospital and reasons of its location. It is not Civic Drive or nothing. The budget allocation is made. Nillumbik need to tell the VHBA to find the best location for patients, a site that is accessible for all, those with mobility issues, the elderly, disadvantaged, where the benefits of a hospital accrue to all in the community without the negative impacts the Civic Drive location has on all users of the precinct. As many as 82 responses supporting the hospital have referenced parking or traffic issues that need to be addressed. Their support was conditional. It was predicated upon traffic and parking issues being solved. The 8th of September lack of information session from the VHBA, you learned that in fact, the VHBA could not give an assurance of unpaid parking. That would be a decision of Austin Health. No traffic modelling or traffic management has been completed. Traffic in the area and surrounds is not the responsibility of the VHBA. Therefore, even strong support for Civic Drive is conditional, and those conditions of traffic and parking have not been addressed by the VHBA because they cannot be. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Grant. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Egan.
Thanks, Councillor Rattrent. Good to see you, Grant. Based on your previous term as a councillor, where, if it doesn't go there, where should the hospital go?
That, Councillor Egan, I say is way above my pay grade, particularly at the moment. My point and my argument is against the location that has been selected, which is this site.
Understand. I just thought you might have an opinion on where it should go.
That's way above my pay grade.
Okay, thanks, Grant.
But anywhere, I'd say anywhere within 10 kilometres of this location would serve the same catchment and, you know, would have the same reasons for people to support it. So I would say if you wanted to pick a spot in Civic Drive and draw a radius of 10, maybe more, 12 kilometres around there, you would find something.
Okay, thanks, Grant. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Perkins.
Good to see you, Grant, and thanks for your time. You're certainly a very busy councillor, and I see you've been busy outside of council.
Unfortunately, so.
And just your comments when you said, particularly not at the moment, indicates to me a challenge could be in the wings in 3 years' time. But anyway, to my question. I'm not sure if you heard from Richard Williamson. Kelly Farrow read out a statement on his behalf just before you, and seemed to indicate that certainly Richard believes that there was a former councillor, and not the Wood councillor, but a former councillor who identified the Civic Drive site and that nobody else knew about it. Have you got any idea who that former councillor might have been?
I do have some idea.
Right.
I guess we'll take that as the answer.
Well, it was
all right.
And that's the end of your questions from me. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Perkins.
Any other questions from councillors? No questions, great. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you, Grant.
Okay.
Now I believe Diane's speaking, so
yes, I'll just jump up.
Same Zoom. Great. Hi, Diane. So you can start. You've got 3 minutes.
Firstly, no council should be coerced to sell such precious parkland. The people of Apollo Parkways enjoy and value our recreation and leisure hub. Councillors have a responsibility to protect assets belonging to the Shire. Our park, trees and essential car park are destined to be lost. The playground, amphitheatre, sports centre and library will be devalued due to competition for parking space and loss of amenity, all downgraded by a construction zone and large dominating build. Our sports centre offers much more than basketball courts. 8 sporting associations and the health club provide activities for all ages and abilities, promoting healthy lifestyles and social connections. These friendships and a sense of belonging are treasured by thousands, those who train and compete and their families who encourage and volunteer. After lockdown closures, members are eager to return and reconnect. Likewise, regulars at the library are keen to resume their book clubs, preschool story time and toy library. Over many years, these community groups have evolved. All the buildings have been maintained and improved at significant expense. These are vital council assets and must be protected from loss and harm. Stadium managers will be striving to grow membership and maximise earning potential for council, while a noisy work site is literally at the front door, creating an impossible demand for space. I'm concerned clubs will relocate if free parking is unavailable and those activities will be lost to the Shire. The VHBA have given no consideration to these existing users, but councillors should see the negative impacts are far-reaching. Councillors, you will fail residents if you sell Apollo land for the Eltham Hospital. The VHBA have failed miserably if their objective was to find a patient-friendly site. They've provided plenty of spin, perceived benefits and tokenistic platitudes, but since July have failed to address countless questions and concerns. Trees to be cleared, planning of a new road through parkland, costs to council, traffic modelling, future expansion and the construction zone. Councillor Perkins repeated at council meetings that council are seeking a more comprehensive understanding of the proposal and the impacts before a decision can be made. With numerous uncertainties remaining and a lack of details to assure a comprehensive understanding of the proposal, I fail to see how any support of this site can be given. Please vote unanimously and send a powerful message that parkland and community assets are precious to Nillumbik. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Diane. Any questions from councillors? Great, thanks, Diane. We will send you back into the waiting room now. And our next speaker is Tim Fleet. So, Tim, you should see a blue button on your screen. If you just click that button, that'll bring you into the meeting. Great, there you are. So you'll just need to turn your video on and unmute yourself. Wonderful. Whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Good evening, councillors. I had the pleasure of meeting you all in either person or via Zoom over the past few months, except for you, Mayor Perkins. So nice to meet you. I'm a local resident in Apollo Parkways and wanted to focus on a couple of points that might not get a mention tonight. As councillors, most of you are currently in your first year of a 4-year term and have spent more time on this hospital than I think you would have imagined you would have. What I want to know from you is, are there things that you want to achieve in your own wards in the next 3 years that you won't be able to achieve now? How do you decide what you don't get to do because of the additional time that has and ultimately will still take your focus over the next 3 years? Because even if you vote yes on the 26th, this is not the end of your time as councillors at the hospital issue. It's going to be a long list, which is including and not limited to parking restrictions around Apollo Parkways, road and traffic implications, safety and pedestrian access and public transport issues, maintaining roads, parks, paths, and even waste management in the area. So that's the next 3 years. And those of you who wish to run again and are successful, then you have to deal with the VHBA's plan to further expand the hospital after 5 years. So even after this is built, it won't stop there, which leads me to my second point. Due to the fact that the VHBA have already flagged expansion after 5 years, anything promised now, car park requirements, building size and footprint, operating hours, are all null and void as everything changes when there's an expansion. So a 3-story building could become a 6-story building. A flat car park could be to the south, could be expanded into a multi-level car park. And council won't be able to do anything about it as the land is sold to the VHBA and they can do what they wish. So now the CAO of the VHBA said free parking cannot be promised as it's going to be controlled by Austin. However, if an arrangement is made for free parking, the arrangement can be altered at any time by the Austin after the sale. Car parking data was obtained by the VHBA for their preliminary report and was taken between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and stated only 70% of the current car park was being utilised, which in my opinion is an unrealistic reflection of the actual expected car parking requirements. And I would argue that there may not be already enough car parking planned for the precinct when the hospital opens, and I'm sure the Nillumbik Transport and Parking team will confirm this when their report comes out prior to the 26th. So in summary, council and councillors' time and energy will be, over the next 4 years and beyond, will be eaten up. Expansion after 5 years means any plans and designs right now will ultimately change. Paid parking can be promised, but can't be promised forever. And car parking data is flawed and under-allocated already and will need to be bigger than what is already planned. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Tim. Any questions from councillors?
Oh, thank you, Tim.
Questions from councillors? And the next speaker is Kate Fleet. So I believe Kate's using the same Zoom as you, Tim.
Just watch, it'll be seamless. Ready?
Oh, quickest transition we've had. Very impressive. Kate,
right.
Whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. As you know, my family and I live in Apollo Parkways, and we're in one of the closest streets located to the proposed hospital. My children attend Diamond Hills Preschool, and we also go to Apollo Parkways Primary School. Regular users the library, playground, shops and cafes. If this hospital development does proceed, it will cause ongoing issues for local residents and users of the precinct for many years to come. A big concern for me is the increased traffic and congestion from the roundabout into the entry of the estate. The VHBA admit that no improvements to road access via the roundabout have been included in any of their plans, and this will put strain on alternate access via Plenty River Drive and increase rat running through the estate as people avoid the roundabout. The VHBA also say they encourage green transport, yet they offer no solutions to achieve this and have admitted that most people will drive cars to this site. There are also no plans for new bus routes to the hospital. The proposed site has no street frontage or direct vehicle access. The VHBA have proposed a new ring road or loop road around the precinct, which will consistently bring traffic through and around the area. Ambulances and heavy vehicle access for deliveries will also have no direct street access and will be required to drive into the precinct, past the children's playground and the stadium entrance to access the hospital's back of house area. Based on this, I'm not sure how the VHBA can say that they will increase pedestrian safety at the precinct with all this extra vehicle movement. The real threat of paid parking there is obviously real because it will be managed by the Austin Health, and the introduction of the additional vehicle traffic from staff, patients, carers and visitors, and of course the existing users of the facilities, as well as parents dropping off and picking up at school times, will push more traffic and congestion into the surrounding residential streets as people avoid to pay for parking. Our local streets are narrow, they're not really designed for parking on both sides of the road, and I've also have safety concerns of vehicles consistently driving up and down these streets and courts looking for free available parking spaces. From the Freedom of Information, an internal council document has confirmed our fears that permit parking or timed parking restrictions may need to be forced onto residents and their visitors, and this is including a radius of up to 600 to 800 metres from the hospital. This will be causing further inconvenience for residents of the area. Having lived in St Kilda, Richmond and Northcote previously, permit parking is definitely something I would not want to wish for Apollo Parkway residents. So recently we've all been reminded of how important our outdoor parks and green spaces are for our physical and mental health. Flat usable green space is at a premium in our beautiful Apollo Parkways estate, and I just urge you all to please save it for future generations. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kate. Any questions from councillors? No questions. Thank you, Kate. We'll send you back into the waiting room. And the next speaker is Brian Murray on behalf of the Nulnbik Ratepayers Association. So Brian, if you'd just like to press the blue button on your screen to be admitted to the meeting. There you are. And you'll just need to unmute yourself and turn your video on so we can see you.
Gotcha. Got me?
We can hear you, yes. You can turn your video on if you want.
There you are.
Wonderful.
So
I'm here.
wearing a hat?
Missed me, did you, Peter?
Oh, I missed that hat.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I ready to go?
Whenever you're ready. You've got 3 minutes.
Right. A reasonable person would come to the natural conclusion that the Eltham Area Community Hospital would be in Eltham. A reasonable person, if looking for the Eltham Area Community Hospital, would start their search and expect to find that hospital in Eltham. It seems clear to us that the need has been identified by the Victorian Government and their healthcare advisors that there is a need for a community hospital in Eltham. That is why they put this paper out and named it the Eltham Area Community Hospital. Note, Eltham. The proposed site in Greensborough will not service the Eltham area well at all. Eltham has a community site that has been vacant for years. It's close to 36, I think it is. Yes, and it has easy access to public transport, trains, bus, bicycle, cars, pedestrians, and is on the main road with easy access to all services at the Eltham Major Activity Centres. The site known as the Eltham Shire Office Site is ideal for the Eltham facility and could easily accommodate all the listed health and care services needed in the Eltham area. The said site in Greensborough is far less suitable as it is located away from Eltham. Access to this site is generally by car, as there is limited public transport access. No one from Eltham could walk. Very few, if any, would cycle, and public transport is limited. Also, looking at the photo and knowing this site, we note that the proposal takes up much of the car park as well as public open space. Where would council staff park, as much of the current car park is reserved for staff during working hours? There would be a need for council to find parking elsewhere close to their offices. There would be users of a recently expanded, where would the users of a recently expanded sporting facility park? Where would staff and hospital users park? Where would people going to the library park? The proposed Greensborough site is wrong for all the above reasons and probably more. The proposed site is not adequate. The Eltham site has ample space to accommodate all parking requirements for the hospital. It has good public transport access and is close to the Eltham major activity centres with all those facilities. If a hospital is needed in Eltham, which the name suggests, then we agree it is we agree that there is a need for a hospital in Eltham. Put the hospital where it is needed in Eltham. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Perkins.
Good on you, Brian. Thanks very much for your submission, and it has been good to see you. Look, just a quick question about, congratulations on your election as president. How many years does that bring it to that you've been president? You must be
since 2002.
2002, nearly 20 years. Okay, well, we'll look forward to celebrating the 20 years if you get. Is it an annual election?
It is.
Well, yeah. I hope you get there, Brian.
All members get to vote.
Excellent.
Is that your question, Councillor Perkins?
Yes.
Any other questions from councillors? Great, thank you, Brian. We'll send you back into the waiting room.
No worries.
And we will move on to our next speaker, Rosemary Burdett. So, Rosemary, you'll see a blue button on your screen. If you just like to click the blue button, that'll let you into the room. Wonderful. And just turn your video on and unmute yourself when you're ready.
Thank you.
Great, there you are. Wonderful. You've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Firstly, I'm in favour of the community hospital in the Eltham ward, but I object to it being built in Civic Drive, Greensborough, for the following 5 reasons. 1. Building the Eltham Area Hospital in Civic Drive, Greensborough, will result in an increase in volume of traffic to Civic Drive. This will mean for those who drive having to navigate the Diamond Creek Road Greensborough bypass roundabout. Many of those will choose to avoid the roundabout by using local roads instead, Plenty River Drive, Brentwick Drive, and possibly Sugar Gum Boulevard. It would also mean a larger volume of traffic on Civic Drive and in the precinct as cars and trucks go to and from the hospital. In addition to this, the VHBA has done no traffic modelling. Number 2, there is no public transport nearby, no train station nearby, and the VHBA often quote the 2 bus stops that are within 400 to 500 metres of this site. But those 400 to 500 metres are either up a very steep hill or a route that requires crossing a 10-lane highway with cars travelling at up to 80 kilometres an hour. Many of the users of the hospital will be vulnerable, elderly, those with a disability, sometimes people who are not able to drive for one reason or another. Yes, some of those will be driven by people they know or by taxi, but this excludes those who do not have support people or the funds for taxis. These people will rely on public transport, which is unrealistic and will disadvantage the already disadvantaged. Number 3, parking. The VHBA have calculated that they expect to need 360 to 370 spaces and that they will provide 430. They haven't told us how. They quote a figure of the car park currently having a peak utilisation of 70% full. But this assessment was made on one afternoon between 1 and 3 p.m. 1 and 3 p.m, the quietest time of day. Having lived here for 33 years, in my experience, at the busiest times, the car park is full all the time. There is not 30% of the car park free. The VHBA say whenever the issue of paid car parking is raised, that this is a matter for Austin Health. No Austin Health facility has free parking. And in fact, no hospital in Melbourne has free parking. None of the new 10 community hospitals have been told that they will have free parking. So why would Austin Health agree to provide free parking at Civic Drive for the users of the sports centre, council offices, library, open space and playground, as well as the parents who use this car park as a safe place to drop off and pick up kids from school? So where are these people going to park? Their only choices will be to pay for parking every time they go to the sports centre looking for parking at the Civic Drive shopping centre or park in local streets. And I haven't got to number 4 and 5.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Any questions from councillors? Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, I am interested to hear what your points 4 and 5 are, Rosemary, but I know that we're quite for time. So would you be able to just touch on what those topic areas were?
Thank you.
I'll allow the question, but if you could just give a really quick summary.
Yep, really quick. So number 4 was just that the local shopping centre, that is the free parking that will be closest to the hospital, that will just be taken by users of that precinct, and local people won't be able to access the shops. The VHBA says that this is going to bring further development of the shopping centre, and I think it will actually harm those local shops. And number 5 is the loss of open space. People talk about this open space as being a waste, like it's not, they dismiss it as a small loss, but the local people use this open space and it would be a real loss to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. Any other questions, councillors? Great. Thank you, Rosemary. We'll send you back into the waiting room. And the next speaker is Sahan Fernando. So Sahan Fernando, I think you're coming in now. Yeah, there you are. You'll just need to unmute yourself and turn your camera on.
All right, can you see me?
Yes.
Yep. All right.
So you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Yep. So I'm against this proposed site location just because that it is a politically driven decision rather than a decision came to by a proper requirement assessment. By looking at the council's proposals, I can see Nilambek, the Apollo Parkway site does not meet any of VHBA requirements. As a matter of fact, Eltham site meets all the requirements. I'm against this site. One of the reasons is that traffic, as the Nilambikshire Council's own traffic and planning officer highlighted, this will increase the traffic at the roundabout. And also it will increase the traffic in that road because VHBA is not planning to do any improvements to this civic drive. And that will actually increase this area got daycare center and also primary school. So that will cause towards accidents, increase in accidents. And also majority of those primary school students do use the library and also use that path to go to their homes. The increase in traffic will increase the accidents in that area. And next thing is again parking. Yeah, I know when the part of the parking was closed for the development renovation of the sport and recreation center, there were quite a bit of parking. The parking in that IGA car park increased significantly, just because that was just due to a closure of 1/3 of the car park. Just imagine losing all of the car park. What's going to be? It will be massive. And the other question I have is that council spent so much money to come up with a master plan back in 2016 to develop this area as a parkland. And back in 2019, it has been zoned as a recreation area. Why the council wants to sell this land, which already zoned as a park and recreation area? If you've been to that area during the COVID lockdown time, I'm talking about initial COVID lockdown time, quite a lot of families use that area to hang around with kids. So why are you doing this kind of stuff? And why I strongly recommend for you to vote no and do not sell this site. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sahan. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Perkins.
Sahan, just your question, why are we doing this sort of stuff? Do you understand that there was no strategic plan or there was no strategic direction from council that this is the direction that we wanted to head to? This is a decision of government, and we're trying to make a decision whether or not to voluntarily sell the land to the state government. It's not something that we brought on.
Yeah, but why it has been proposed in first instance? I mean, if you are not planning to sell, why you proposed it in your proposals? I mean, you have proposed about 4 or 5 other sites, actually 3 other sites, much better than this site. And why you included this one in here? Is it just because that you want to sell this site, right?
No, there's been no decision of council that identifies this as a potential site.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions, Councillor Perkins? We can't.
No, I just wanted to make that one.
Yeah, of course.
Are you asking me a question?
All right, sure. Thanks for that.
Are there any other questions from councillors? Great, thank you, Sahan. We'll send you back into the waiting room.
Sure.
And the next speaker is Amanda Stefanchik. I hope I pronounced that right. Hi, Amanda. So you'll just need to turn your video on and unmute yourself.
Right.
Wonderful, there you are. And whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Civic Drive, Greensborough is a terrible location for the Eltham Area Hospital. I think every reasonable person who's aware of these plans already knows this. So we recently chose Nillumbik Council to be our home because we value green space, community, family-friendly environments, and the peace that this area offers. We purchased a block at Whittingham Circuit, hoping to build our home and establish our lives in this area. We were so excited to have this green space, the park, the library, everything all so close. To find out that this area could be permanently devastated by the introduction of a large multi-storey hospital, it's almost unbelievable. To find out that this peaceful area right outside our front door might be a major activity zone, roads are going to be further clogged, and the whole area surrounded by paid parking, it's almost ludicrous. We're so disappointed by the changes we might have to look forward to if this project goes ahead. We might have to look forward to being stuck in traffic at the roundabout more than everyone already is. And once you throw ambulances into that mix as well, it's going to be a nightmare. We can look forward to the rat running in the local streets, primary school kids, the special development school kids going to school, dodging speeding drivers, trying to escape these clogged roads. We can look forward to every available space being used for parking. Will we need parking permits for our family and friends who want to visit us, or they just have to pay hospital parking rates for the privilege? But of course, those issues are all things that will directly affect us as homeowners in the area. But what about the wider community, the people who are going to be using these facilities? The individuals in our community who just don't have access to a car for transport. They'll be required to hike 500 metres for the privilege of accessing hospital care. I think everyone here is familiar with the area. You know this isn't a pleasant level stroll from the bus stop. This is a hike. It's not reasonable to ask wheelchair users, people on crutches, expectant mothers or elderly people to do this just to access healthcare in Australia. Councillors and Mayor Perkins, in making your decisions, I just invite you to spend some time at Civic Drive on the weekend and just see kids learning how to ride their bikes in the quiet car park, families picnicking, flying kites, enjoying just our precious green space. I also urge you to please consider the issues that have been raised here tonight by so many of your constituents. Everyone knows this is the wrong location for the Eltham Area Hospital. Please think very carefully about the ramifications of the decision that's in your hands. Please save our park.
Thanks, Amanda. Any questions from councillors? Great, thank you, Amanda. We'll send you back into the waiting room. And the next speaker is Stuart Callahan on behalf of Diamond Valley Basketball Association. Hi, Stuart. So you'll just need to turn your video on and unmute yourself. There you are.
Hello, everyone.
Whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Hello, councillors. Hello, Carl. Good to see you all again. As you all know, I'm president of the Diamond Valley Basketball Association. We are the largest community group in the Nillumbik Shire. We've got about 5,000 members. So this hospital precinct is going to impact on us greatly. We have basketball games for juniors and seniors, ranging right from under 8s right up to under 18s, including men's and women's, and also representative basketball. The last thing we as an association want to do is to be against a community hospital, which we think is very good for the community. But sadly, we cannot give our support to this project. We have some very real concerns about the suitability of the location, both as impact on the community, as well as some of the problems it would cause for our programs and members, both during construction and once in operation. We acknowledge that with more information, this could be a suitable location, but the fact of the matter is now there is not enough information to allay our concerns. Unfortunately, the proposed location is between the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre and the Diamond Valley Library, right on top of the existing parking area near the stadium. We just had 4 new courts built there. So our biggest concern has been the lack of available information that has been sought before choosing this location. Studies about the impacts of traffic, parking have not been completed, yet alone considered. And the DVBA board has submitted detailed questions to the VHBA, but we have not received any formal responses to any of those questions, which has been really disappointing. We've met with them a couple of times, but we've had no formal responses to our questions posed. So without an evidence-based response to our concerns, we cannot support this location. Some of the questions we posed to them were, how will the already difficult traffic in the area be impacted? How will the construction affect parking and access to the stadium, in particular the new access to our brand new forecourt facility? Why can't Austin Health guarantee that this will not cause parking to become paid parking? I mean, for example, if our members were forced to pay for parking, this would double the cost for mum and dad to bring their little boy or girl to play basketball on a Saturday. And in a lot of cases, that would make the sport just too expensive. Mum and dad wouldn't be able to then bring their child to basketball, and they would just stop playing basketball altogether, because the cost of parking could in effect double the cost that they have to play basketball. Why is public transport considered a positive reason to use the site when the location is largely car dependent? The majority of participants in the DVBA are children. How is their safety going to be affected in light of all this? So I guess without the information to answer these questions, and unfortunately we haven't been able to get any answers from the VHBA, there's simply not enough evidence to support the location. So we urge the councillors to vote against the proposed new development. And I think myself and all the others who have spoken tonight, hopefully you've heard us all and you've heard all our concerns, and hopefully they're all taken on board. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Now we can't do questions for that one because you're speaking on behalf of Diamond Valley Basketball Association. So thank you. We'll send you back to the waiting room, and
No
we'll
worries.
to Shirley Diaz.
Thank you, Stuart.
So Shirley, if you'd like to, there you are, wonderful. So you'll just need to turn your video on and unmute yourself. Fantastic. You've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak. So I'm speaking as an Eltham resident, and I'd just like to say that I'm supportive of an Eltham community hospital being located in the Eltham area. I don't support it being located at Civic Drive, Greensborough. I think it'll be really valuable and a real asset for us to have a small community hospital in either Eltham, Diamond Creek or Hurstbridge. My understanding of the purpose of a community hospital is to be able to provide routine and minor services to patients so that they don't need to travel to larger hospitals like the Austin. And I think that would be a fantastic outcome for some of the older residents who may need more regular routine care. I also understand that community hospitals are not really large. They can be compact and well designed. And I'm certain that our community could be involved in designing a hospital whose exterior aligns with our local character. I think the proposed site at Greensborough doesn't appear to meet the requirement to serve our Eltham community, that it would rather serve the Greensborough area. It's difficult to get to, doesn't have any train connections, and it would be difficult for medical staff also to access without driving by car. I think there's a potential to lose the opportunity that a small hospital can provide to the local economies of places like Eltham, Diamond Creek or Hurstbridge, and that's worth considering as well. Thank you, that's all.
Great, thanks, Shirley. Any questions from councillors? Great, thank you, Shirley. We'll send you back into the waiting room. And our next speaker is David Boyle. So David will bring you into the meeting. Wonderful, there you are. And David, if you'd just like to turn your video on, unmute yourself. Wonderful, and whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr Mayor, Shire Councillors, Mr Chief Executive Officer and attendees. My name is David Boyle. I've been an Apollo Parkways resident for 38 years and never before have I been motivated to address council. And I guess that gives some indication of my thoughts on this process. I've come here tonight to talk about the Eltham Community Hospital. I've previously responded to online surveys and provided additional written comments. Thank you for the opportunity to address council tonight. Like the other speakers, I'm opposed to the construction of a hospital in Civic Drive. And in reality, I guess I'm tired of fighting against changes to my environment made by people who are not affected by the changes they instigate. Much of what I had to say has been spoken about by many of the other speakers, and I'll try not to bore you with the detail of that. But I particularly want to address 3 issues which relate to the lack of due diligence by the Victorian Health Building Authority, the VHBA, in the nomination of this site of the hospital. This lack of due diligence is evident in the following ways. 1, the lack of adequate consultation with the community that will be impacted by the hospitals. That is, those who live within, say, 1 kilometre of the site, be it both in Nillumbik and in Banyule. This lack of consultation led to many issues being overlooked, and the VHB's response for the online forum on the 8th of September has effectively been, we don't know, that will be dealt with later. In other words, a willingness to create problems for others to resolve. I won't be here when the problem arises, somebody else's problem to deal with. Those problems will be mine, they will be ours. Secondly, the site does not meet any of the VHBA's 5 site selection criteria, and very few of the design criteria, and hence the VHBA is not in a position to make an informed decision on this site. Thirdly, the effect of this on providing false benefits attributed to this site. I've referred to a number of online documents, and including a community engagement summary, which was a meeting attended by 10 Eltham community members. They identified a number of matters which are still important, albeit to this site: impact of traffic and parking, walkability and access to public transport. The main drivers they saw were for social services such as drug and alcohol rehabilitation support, mental health and family and domestic violence. The building must be modular with a capacity to expand. Importantly, it was identified this building and the provision of these services should be located outside central Eltham. Put the problem somewhere else. Selection criteria I talk about are the site features. The site is not big enough. The slope is not great enough to blend in a multi-storey hospital. Location and site access have been discussed many times, and I won't go there. But they haven't done analysis. How can they make such a decision? The planning requirements, it's been mentioned before, only recently zoned for public park and recreation, and for good reason. Sure, this land can be rezoned by council, but so too can other sites in other more appropriate areas. This is up to council. And finally, the availability for acquisition. This too is in council's domain.
Thanks, David. If you could just wrap up, that's time.
I guess my one final comment would be, considering all the issues that have been raised, keep in mind that Apollo Parkway was designed and constructed approximately 40 years ago as a residential area, and it is limited by the infrastructure needs of that time, particularly in regard to family structures and how that impacts on educational needs, recreational needs, and of course, parking, traffic movement, and the related health and safety and security matters. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Any questions from councillors? Wonderful. Thank you, David. We'll send you back into the waiting room.
Thank you.
We have one more speaker, and then we'll be on to the written submissions. So Chris Sherry is our final speaker. Hi, Chris. If you'd just like to turn your video on and unmute yourself.
I think I've done that, yes.
Yep. Wonderful.
Yes.
Whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
I need to make that big, that's all, because it's a tiny little... there I am. Good, thanks. Yes, look, hello all you councillors, and we just want to say that I speak for myself, that's what I'm supposed to do, but we are vehemently opposed to placing the Eltham Community Hospital at Civic Drive, Greensborough. Our reasons? All equally important, but above all, the site's too small and access is too limited. No one will benefit from this hospital location, not the patients, not the residents, and not the people who use the Civic Drive facilities and primary school. We urge the Nillumbik Council not to sell this land to the VHBA. The consideration for the safety and well-being of patients is very important. There's no public transport to the proposed hospital site. The nearest train station is 2.5 kilometres away, and the nearest bus stop means a very long uphill walk. Not everyone who visits hospital is fully ambulant and/or drives their own car. The terrain is hilly and hazardous for the elderly, the disabled, pregnant women, and generally unwell people. The roundabout, where's that? Oh, the 2 minutes, okay. I'm just checking the time. The roundabout at Civic Drive, Diamond Creek Road is already at capacity. Even without a hospital, there's insufficient parking. There is a huge amount of traffic to and from the primary school. Visitors to the library and to the sporting centres need parking spaces since there's no public transport. Additional traffic for patients and deliveries to the hospital would cause enormous and untenable congestion in these narrow streets. When the proposed hospital puts in paid car parking, visitors and patients will seek free parking in the neighbouring streets. These are small streets and cul-de-sac courts with footpath access to the park. Driveways would be blocked off with patients' cars and the congestion would be chaotic. As Svetlana pointed out, the CFA and the bushfire emergencies. What will happen to the CFA emergency zoning? The proposed hospital area is an emergency place of refuge in case of bushfires. Bushfires. This is important for everyone's safety. Emergency vehicles and fire trucks need proper access. The hospital would prevent this. The beautiful aspect of trees and nature that proponents of the hospital maintain would benefit the patients so much would ironically be destroyed as the hospital will be built over it. In addition to building footprints, set up and put down areas, site offices, vehicles and deliveries will require a massive area. Plus there are plans to extend the hospital at a later date. The trees and parkland will be completely taken over. Also, safety and security of Apollo Parkway's residents would be at risk due to the kinds of services this community hospital plans to include. Drug and alcohol and mental health clinics, plus a possible needle exchange. Who will police the activities of these patients in the surrounding parklands before and after their appointments? Discarded syringes, empty alcohol bottles, hazardous for families and children who play in the park. These parklands are zoned recreational. The proposed hospital would turn this into a commercial zone from 8 a.m. till 11 p.m. with ambulance sirens day or night.
You could just wrap up.
Okay, we urge the council not to sell this site to the VHBA. That's the main point of all of that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Any questions from councillors? Councillor Stockman.
Yes.
Yeah, hi Chris. We've got some written submissions coming up. Any chance you could read them out? That was great reading.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Right.
Yeah, no, I was just putting a bit of emphasis, but it slowed me down a bit. I still had a paragraph to go. I missed out the last paragraph.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. We'll send you back to the waiting room.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Now, that was page 8 out of 40 on my running sheet. And we now have the fun job of reading out all the written submissions. So the way we're going to do this is we'll take it in turns between councillors. So we'll rotate around the room. That way we're not all going to speak for too long. And I can save my voice, because I'm sure I'll have a very sore throat if I read all of these out. I will read out the first, and then after that we will go in the order from me to Councillor Eyre, then Councillor Payne, Councillor Perkins, Councillor Stockman, Councillor Egan, Councillor Duffy, and then back to me. So Councillor Eyre, you'll be next, but I'll read out this first one, which is from Alan Massini. And Alan has written, "The location is already severely congested and we would lose more open space. There is already insufficient parking for the council offices, the library and the enlarged sports centre. There are existing issues with the lack of parking for parents dropping off and picking up children from Apollo Parkways Primary School, Childcare Centre and Special School. In addition, residents in the Plenty River Drive area already have compromised access to Diamond Creek Road. There are also plans to build more housing near the council offices, which would exacerbate existing problems. A hospital needs ready access, which one in this location would not have. The proximity of Diamond Creek Road and the Greensboro bypass would compromise access, especially in peak periods, because of heavy traffic. A hospital needs ready access, preferably near a train station and with plenty of public transport." And that's the submission from Alan Massini. And Councillor Eyre will now read out the submission from Margaret Shannon.
Thank you, Chair. Apollo Parkways, where are the parks? My husband and myself have resided in this community for over 40 years. We chose this area for the green wedge rural lifestyle. It is regretful that we see the local parkland being proposed for a hospital. It will cause congestion in the Apollo Parkways Council area and see parking and roads overwhelmed. This parkland is already at capacity for parking at present and see a higher demand with the extension of the sports centre. What benefit will building proposed Eltham Area Community Hospital bring to this shire? Community opposed council overselling the existing council building to development earlier and strongly voiced community concerns over development. Does this council not value its residents? Little by little, our green space is being taken. What differentiates our shire is the natural bushland surrounds. Children use this space often and enjoy some land to run or walk the dog. We don't need more buildings in this area. Once our parkland is taken, our shire will lose its appeal for future residents as a desirable area to reside. Please, council, listen to the community that you represent.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. And Councillor Payne will now read out the submission from Scott Lawrence.
I'd like to object to the proposed site of the Eltham Hospital. The proposed site is totally unsuitable to be used for an industrial facility that will operate 24/7. It will ruin the general character of the area and will industrialise a community open space. It's one of the last remaining open spaces in the council area where our children can play without fear of roads. We should be creating more open spaces. We came to this area because it was part of the green wedge and because of the green space. This proposal will take this away. I'm also concerned about traffic and exposure of children at the playground, library, primary school and basketball stadium to the inevitable miscreants that a hospital attracts, particularly one that could cater for drug rehabilitation. Why would the council support a facility that attracts such persons to an area frequented by children? Put an Eltham hospital in Eltham and stop using Greensboro as the dumping ground for the facilities that don't fit with Eltham upper class views. Woohoo.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. The next submission is quite short, so we'll get Councillor Perkins to do 2 submissions because they're both quite short. So Councillor Perkins, if you could read the submissions for Gerda Stihel and Michael Rizik.
Thank you. So from Gerda, I object to the building of the hospital because the area is already experiencing enormous traffic congestion with a primary school, childcare centre, playground, sports complex, council offices and library all within close proximity of the proposed hospital. No public transport is close by and traffic is already mayhem at the best of times. The intersection of Civic Drive, Diamond Creek Road and Greensboro Bypass is dangerous and will be a disaster waiting to happen if the hospital is built on this site. So it was Gerda, next it's Michael. I'm writing to voice my opposition to the selection of Apollo Parkways as the location of the Eltham Area Community Hospital. This site is not suitable for a hospital and does not meet several site selection criteria, with the biggest being site access. The site is 2.5 kilometres from the nearest train station, with only one bus route passing nearby. The surrounding area is full of hills, reducing walkability, especially for those with medical issues. Residents will be impacted by noise, traffic and loss of public recreational space. Traffic-wise, Civic Drive is already extremely congested during school pickup and drop-off times. Adding a hospital to such a short stretch of road that already provides access to the Sports and Recreation Centre, playground, library, council, primary school and civic plaza will create traffic and parking chaos. The residents of Apollo Parkways are overwhelmingly against development at the cost of public green space, and in particular, the very spot that has been selected for the hospital, which they afford to keep as open recreational space for nearly 15 years. The VHBA must do a better job of selecting a site that actually meets criteria before proceeding with such a costly and major project. Nillumbik councillors must vote against the sale of Apollo Park.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. We'll move on to the next submission. So I'll ask Councillor Stockman to read out the submission from Alex Sukovic.
Yeah, I object in the strongest possible terms to the proposed hospital at Civic Drive in Apollo Parkways. I believe a better location must be found for an important health service that will cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. VHBA's own site selection criteria contradict their current choice. The site is not easily accessible by public transport. It is not situated in a major activity hub. Moreover, it is only 1 hectare with no space for expansion, as opposed to 5 hectares that they required at the start of the selection process. VHBA state that the environmental responsibility and encouraging green solutions are their top priorities, but they are making patients and staff drive to the hospital, and by doing so increase emissions and exacerbate climate change. The value of engaging with the community has been undermined by excluding the residents from decision-making on a preferred location for the hospital, and by ignoring the community consultative committee's recommendations about the accessibility of the hospital by public transport and walkability for people with mobility issues. That they don't have control over parking that will be taken by Austin, nor can they promise a dedicated bus service to the site. Plenty River Gorge is less than 1 kilometre away, but VHBA have no plans for the days of high fire danger. The expanded stadium is serviced by 2 huge fire hydrant tanks and an eyesore blocking the gym from view when someone is entering the precinct. What will the fire safety requirement for a 3 to 5 storey hospital building? What will be the fire requirement? Where will they build the tanks? On the amphitheatre or in the wetlands next to the gym? VHBA have committed a massive error of judgment that they present the site choice as a foregone conclusion. Nillumbik councillors must stop VHBA in their tracks and refuse to sell the Apollo Park. Sincerely yours, Dr. Art Sukovic.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. We'll move on to the next submission. So I'll ask Councillor Egan to read out the submission from Trent Burgess.
Thank you. Thank you for reading my submission. There is strong community support for the building of a local hospital. However, the location preferred by VHBA, Civic Drive Apollo Parkways, has almost no local support, particularly from a health and safety, equity of access and sustainability perspective. I don't believe this site represents a smart and sustainable vision for the local and broader community. This location does not consider the long-term health and safety of the local community, including pedestrian safety, particularly children, livability, environmental sustainability, traffic congestion, equity and ease of access, parking and community spirit, and go against the sustainability and universal design policies outlined by the VHBA. There are other locations within the region that just make more sense and are better supported by public transport and related infrastructure and services that would support and benefit this hospital. Below, I have highlighted my concerns. Number one, public transport. By its own admission, the Nillumbik Council assessment indicates this site is poorly serviced by public transport. All staff, patients and visitors will have no choice but to drive and park at this location. Planning with vision and sustainability would dictate these kinds of services should be closely located to rail and bus thoroughfares, making it accessible to all individuals within the community. Not being located near a public transport hub will subject the local community to decades of increased traffic congestion, pollution and safety concerns. Austin Mercy Hospital's campus, located across the road from Heidelberg train station, serves as a perfect model that could be emulated with this proposal. Traffic and parking. The proposed Apollo Parkways site is already a busy location due to the local Apollo Parkways Primary School, Diamond Valley Special Development School, Polytechnic Greensboro, and the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre. By its own admission, the Nillumbik Traffic Planning Officer has indicated the local area is at peak vehicular and parking capacity, particularly during school drop-off, pick-up and other school activities and during peak sports times. Parking during school drop-off and pick-up times is already very difficult. The current parking location preferred and indicated by the schools is the car park currently earmarked for this development. Removing this and or restricting parking via paid or timed parking will lead to increased safety risks through illegal parking and community frustration. Many parents and children walk from their homes or the current parking facilities. Adding additional hospital traffic, large service vehicle and ambulances will significantly increase the risk to primary school aged pedestrians. It will also increase the likelihood of parents choosing to drive their children versus walking, and significantly reduce livability for the local community.
Thank you, Councillor Egan. That is time. So we'll have to cut that one off there, but councillors will be able to read the rest of it in our own time. We'll move on to the next one by Victoria Coravin, and I'll ask Councillor Duffy to read that one out.
Thank you, Councillor Ramtran. So Victoria says, to Nillumbik Shire councillors, I object to the Eltham Hospital being built in Civic Drive, Greensboro. I'm a member of the gym and I saw firsthand how well the whole precinct was used before COVID lockdown started. Once the facilities reopen, there will be basketball and netball games at the stadium, dodgeball, squash and table tennis competitions, group fitness classes at all hours of the day and on weekends. I live in Diamond Creek and we have no public library, so many families come to the Diamond Valley Library and enjoy the newly built playground and flat open space between the big car park and the Greensboro bypass. In December, many local primary schools have their Christmas carols in the amphitheatre, with southern space being used as overflow car park for the families. The hospital will undermine the existing uses of the precinct. It must be built at a different location. I urge the councillors to vote no to the sale of the land on the 26th of October. Yours sincerely, Victoria.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. And I will now read out the submission from Sergi Coravin. Sergi has written, to Nillumbik councillors, I am against the open space at Civic Drive being sold to VHBA to build Eltham Area Community Hospital. Nillumbik is called a Greenwedge Shire for a reason. People live here and pay astronomical rates for green spaces being preserved by the council. The talk is the state government can take the park by compulsory acquisition. Let them try. Don't roll for them. They are not the ones who voted you in. We did. VHBA don't know what they are doing. They haven't done their research and have no hard data. All they are giving the public and councillors is guesses and speculations. Like ostriches, they hide their heads in the sand of these issues will be addressed later in the process. They don't recognise the risks of shoehorning the new structure and service into the precinct that is already packed. It is ridiculous what VHBA are proposing to do. Shove the multi-storey building in front of the public library, just meters away from the houses in Wintingham Circuit, and turn the only flat space in the civic precinct into a parking lot. 2 years ago, almost $1 million was spent on the park that they are about to destroy. What a waste of ratepayers and taxpayers' money. Stadium, 16.5 million, won't be accessible because Austin will charge for parking. Library, don't know the exact figure, but safe to say at least 250K, completely obscured and dwarfed by this white elephant of a hospital. No public transport to the site means the problems we already have at the roundabout of death will become unsurmountable. Just imagine a poor sod crossing Greensborough bypass to get to the hospital and stopping all the traffic. If VHBA cannot see straight, it becomes your responsibility to stop and redirect them to a more appropriate site. And that is the submission from Sergi. We'll move on to the next submission from John Molina, and that one will be read by Councillor Eyre.
Thanks, Chair. Dear Committee, as a concerned Greensborough resident, I wish to make the following objections regarding the selected site of an Eltham Community Hospital in the beautiful Apollo Parkways in Civic Drive, Greensborough. Whilst I have no objection to the Eltham Hospital development, as a local Greensborough resident, I have difficulty in understanding its choice of location. Upon the site selection criteria used by the VHBA, there is not a single mention of what other alternative sites were considered at a recent Zoom meeting with VHBA. They also failed to answer their reasoning. The site selected even fails to meet the ideal requirements listed in the primary objectives, such as A, location. There is no health-related services nearby. B, it contravenes current zoning laws on an existing protected parkland reserve. Public Park Recreation Zone, PPRZ, is the highest level of protection possible, which Apollo Parklands Civic Drive, Greensborough achieved in 2019, and encroaches on an area that has been severely impacted by a prior land sale. C, site access is not ideal due to lack of close public transport, thus reliance on private motor vehicles is inevitable. D, land acquisitions will require local council approval or forced purchase if approval is not obtained. Lack of transparency by the selection committee at the time meant that selection criteria excluded local residents and failed to seek their point of views or needs. The current community consultative committee meetings failed to represent those residents most affected by the proposed hospital location. The reporting of the last meeting in June gives a skewed view as it fails to record any reservations on its proposal and purely concentrates on the service delivery principles. An independent traffic management investigation is yet to be prepared to consider the increased volume of traffic and parking needs of the local school, the new residential blocks, library, sporting complex, council offices, children and family recreation area. Finally, this whole project appears to be veiled in a blanket of secrecy and has taken advantage of the current pandemic restrictions we live under to push through their secret agenda. This area is already well serviced by existing medical services located in Greensborough and does little to address the lack of services in the Eltham area as promised in their reasoning. It has all the characteristics of a pork barrelling exercise by the Department of Health, and I fail to understand why the old Eltham Council offices site, more ideally suited, was not considered.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Right on time. We'll move on to the next submission by Irina Chikowski, and that will be read by Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Irina says, the Nillumbik Shire Council must stand their ground against the state government's park grab. Labor promised a community hospital in Eltham electorate because it is a marginal electorate. They're quite capable of finding a more appropriate site either in Nillumbik or Banyule without destroying a community precinct in Civic Drive. VHBA keep us in the dark because they don't have sufficient information. As evident from the info session, they are clutching at the straws, trying to convince themselves, foremost, the councillors and residents that the hospital in Civic Drive is a good idea. Stefano kept referring to the building being nestled into a slope. Unless they build 3 stories below the ground, highly unlikely, it will be looming over all the surrounding buildings as a testimony to short-sightedness of VHBA and the council who allow this monstrosity to happen. VHBA give no guarantees that parking and traffic issues will be resolved. Having no accurate data, they used Google aerials to determine the use of the large car park. Fire safety concerns, not addressed. Non-existent public transport to the site, forcing everyone to drive and increase pollution in the process. Out of their control, it is a different government department that deals with the issue. But even if the Department of Transport decided to make a dedicated bus service to Civic Drive, it won't be possible because of the tightness of the small roundabout. There is one certainty: the hospital will expand within 5 years of construction. Where to? Up or to the southern space that they want to use as a car park initially? Great. Larger hospital, more staff, more patients, but less car park and no public transport. VHBA have not done their due diligence before approaching Nillumbik to sell the land. They did not even know that the area is zoned public, park and recreation. These are the people who are paid 6-figure salaries from our taxes. Nillumbik is the shire where open spaces are valued and preserved. Live by this value and vote no to selling the Civic Drive Park to VHBA. Yours sincerely, Irina.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. And the next submission is from Larissa Pichagunia, and that will be read by Councillor Perkins.
Thank you. Dear councillors, I'm strongly opposed to the proposed location of the Eltham Area Community Hospital in Apollo Parkways. The Civic Drive site is well used by local families, school children and visitors to the stadium, library, council offices and the newly built playground. In the past year and a half, the stadium has been expanded and the library revamped. So once the lockdown is over, there will be even more users. These people need green open space that connects the library and stadium. It must be saved. Council might feel that they own the land in the Civic Drive precinct, but it belongs to the households in Apollo Parkways on both sides of the Greensboro bypass. The homeowners in the area paid for this open space via developers' contribution when the estate was created. We deserve better. Congestion at the big roundabout and lack of public transport will disadvantage both locals and hospital staff and patients. This is the wrong spot for the hospital. Ask VHBA to find a better one. Refuse to sell the land. Regards, Larissa.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. The next submission is from Julia Zatova, and that will be read by Councillor Stockman.
As a mother of a little girl, I strongly object to the proposed location of the Eltham Community Hospital. I've been a resident of the local area for over 6 years. Families in Apollo Parkways need the southern recreation space and Civic Drive to exercise and have picnics. We've already lost half of the open space to housing development. Now the very last bit of flat open space is threatened by the authority that is supposed to have people's health in mind. The hospital doesn't fit in the small space that is already used by thousands of people. We want our daughter to be safe when she walks to Apollo Parkways Primary School in the future. We want outdoor fitness equipment installed on the perimeter of the southern space so users of the gym can exercise outdoors. We want our mental health supported by the council who preserves the flat green space for families so we can teach our kids to ride a bike or play games or fly a kite. In our hilly neighbourhood, the spaces like the park at Civic Drive are hard to find. They must be cherished and maintained now and into the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. The next submission is from Dimitri Rizik, and that will be read by Councillor Egan.
Thank you. It's Dimitri Rizik. Dear councillors, as a former basketball player for Apollo Rockets and residents of Apollo Parkways, I strongly object to VHBA's plans to build Eltham Area Community Hospital in Civic Drive Precinct. Families and sports teams must have the free car park and use of the southern recreation space to stay physically active. It is a horrible idea to destroy the park which supports the healthy lifestyles of the local and wider community. During their info session, VHBA didn't give us much information at all. except for truisms like many people will benefit from having these services closer to home. This can be said about any location and any services. Lacking is the truth about taking away the community park and decimating the very much used car park. Lacking is analysis of traffic that will be generated by the expanded basketball stadium. They don't know and they don't care that they don't know, and this is the most disturbing bit. BHBA are deliberately misleading people by not once acknowledging that the land they're trying to build a hospital on is zoned public park and recreation. They obviously don't care much about disease prevention and are just going through the motions to deliver on the Labor government's promise of 10 community hospitals. Councillors must stop them before it is too late. Regards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Egan. The next submission is from Gail Molina, and that will be read by Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. Gail says, Dear Committee, as a very concerned resident of Apollo Parkways, I would like to make the following comments regarding the proposed Eltham Area Community Hospital in our local Greensboro Parklands. Building of this hospital contravenes current zoning. The Minister of Planning rezoned Civic Drive to Public Park and Recreation Zone, the highest level of protection in October 2019. It's a recreational area which is well frequented by residents and their children for leisure and exercise. It encroaches on an area that has already been severely impacted by a prior land sale, which conflicts between the operation of a hospital and being within 30 metres of residential houses. The site is not ideal due to the lack of close public transport, thus reliance on private motor vehicles is inevitable. According to the Nillumbik, the Greenwedge Shire Bushland Reserves and Wetlands website, Council manages 100 bushlands and wetland reserves. These reserves provide an important refuge for Nillumbik's unique range of plants and animals where residents can spend time with nature and enjoy a range of cultural and recreational activities, conserving and enhancing the values of this land for future generations. Building a hospital on this recreational area will greatly impact our Greenwedge area. The amphitheatre is a place of last resort and a CFA staging area in case of bushfires. It will greatly impact on the facilities already in the area, such as the library, a quiet time for families and residents of the area to read and students to study for their exams. With the busy hospital across the road, this will be impossible. Primary school students often go to the library after school whilst awaiting pickup. Apart from the safety of their children, parents will find it impossible to park. Young people using the sports and library facilities will not be able to afford parking, so will use surrounding streets to park, which will have a huge impact on local residents. A newly developed children's playground, which is well used, will become dangerous for young children, especially if there is a drug and alcohol clinic nearby. To sum up, I would like to make an impassioned plea to the Nillumbik Council not to sell this land to VHBA and to implore the VHBA to find another site to build their hospital and to not take away our small piece of recreational land. Thank you from Gail Molina, a Greensboro resident.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. The next submission is from Resta Fernando, and I will read this one out. 1. Traffic congestion is a major concern as evidenced by the Nillumbik Shire's initial assessment of this proposed project. Civic Drive is the major road providing the residents access to the busy Greensboro bypass, and any further development of significant projects around this road will deteriorate the community's ability to access the Greensboro bypass. Any major community infrastructure project such as this needs to take into consideration the state government's PPPT recommendations and requirement under the Melbourne 2050 plan. The staff and patients visiting this proposed hospital need to have easy access to public transport like trains. 2. Parking. People visiting the council offices, library and sports centre enjoy free parking in the area. The available parking is also used for school drop-offs and pickups. Redevelopment of the current sports centre will have more users for this facility, and requirements for parking in this vicinity is only likely to increase, and a lack of it would also create congestion in the local area roads. The proposed hospital is going to add further pressure for parking requirements and likely to cause a spillover effect on the nearby streets and create congestion on local area roads. 3. Overdevelopment of the area. This area already has a small shopping mall, 2 schools, TAFE, Sports Centre, Shire offices and library. This is the only parkland available in this immediate precinct, and development on the existing parkland will forever destroy the area which is enjoyed by the whole community. Not to mention the surrounding community facilities and the council offices, library, sports centre requires this land as an emergency evacuation centre, a lack of which may jeopardise the safety of the community members using these facilities. 4. Apollo Parkland's location is within proximity to other health facilities, e.g. North Park Hospital, Bundoora, La Trobe Medical Centre, Bundoora, Austin Hospital, Heidelberg. Whereas on the other hand, there isn't any health facility near areas such as Eltham, Montmorency, Diamond Creek, Wattle Glen, Hurstbridge, Kangaroo Ground, etc. And it would be prudent and more justifiable on the state government's part to develop a health facility in an area which would be able to service the residents of those areas that do not have easy, close access to healthcare. This whole proposal clearly shows that either not much thought and planning has been put into this whole matter by VHBA and the state government, or there are some other vested interests that want this project to be shifted from sites that are more suitable compared to the Apollo Parkway area. The lack of planning and oversight does not meet the community's expectation, and the Nillumbik Shire Council, representing the local community, should unanimously vote against selling this land to the state government. Moreover, I urge the Nillumbik Shire Council to firstly submit a written complaint to the VHBA regarding the VHBA not following the state government's PPPT recommendations and requirement under the Melbourne 2050 plan. There's one more paragraph, but I am out of time, so we'll leave that one there. The next submission is from Irina Guskova, and that will be read by Councillor Eyre.
Thanks, Chair. Dear councillors, I'm writing to you in hope that you can stop the hospital being built in Civic Drive. I'm a pensioner who lives in Apollo Parkways. I have arthritis in both knees and it's very hard for me to walk uphill. I want the council to keep the flat land south of car parks for residents like me, elderly people with mobility issues. I don't drive. When I needed to go to the city, I caught a train from Greensborough. Why not build a hospital next to Greensborough Station? Then people like me will be able to get on and off the train straight to the hospital door. Apollo Parkways is the very worst place for a hospital. There is no train station or bus stops close by. There are children everywhere. Who is going to be responsible if the child gets hurt? They closed the library for a while, but once Melbourne is vaccinated, it will reopen. Hospital will block the library and take all of our flat green space. Do not allow this to happen. I can't come to the council meeting, but I hope you will make the right decision to save our park. Kind regards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. The next submission is from Bella Kakaskja, and that will be read by Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. To Nillumbik councillors, Eltham Area Community Hospital shall not be built at Civic Drive, Greensborough. As a practice manager of the institution providing health services, I believe the services offered at the proposed hospital, mental health, drug and alcohol rehabilitation, possible needle syringe exchange, cannot be located 100 metres from the children's playground and 200 metres from Apollo Parkways Primary School. The fact that there is no provision of public transport to the site makes it inaccessible to the very people the hospital is meant to support, disadvantaged and vulnerable members of the community. The statement that locals will be able to access these services more easily holds no water due to the breach of anonymity issues. The precinct is packed to the brim with existing uses and most families know each other by sight. Another aspect I want to raise is the mental health of the local community. This is their only flat, green, open space. They must have it preserved to be physically active and to have a place to catch up, even when the travel radius is 5 to 10 kilometres. COVID lockdowns have been extremely hard on young families and teens, and people must have open space to thrive. I'm confident that Nillumbik councillors will make the right decision and vote to preserve the Civic Drive precinct in its integrity. Kind regards, Bella.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. The next submission is from Irina Protsenko, and that will be read by Councillor Perkins.
Thank you. Dear councillors, I ask you to vote against the sale of the land in Civic Drive. I live in Apollo Parkways. It is a beautiful place because it is green and friendly. I love going on walks most days, although being 1 year shy of 80, it is not easy. You see, we have a very hilly neighbourhood. There is a bit of flat land between library and gym, and it's very precious. I often see families with young kids using the space, teens on bikes, people walking their dogs. It's the heart of Apollo community. Hospital doesn't belong in there. We have narrow streets that are flooded with cars at school drop-off and pick-up times. It is almost impossible to drive out at the big roundabout with all the traffic we already have. Why do we have to suffer even more? There is a huge field across the roundabout. It is no longer needed for North East Link, and yet the state government tries to squeeze the hospital where people already struggle to find car park at busy times and where the park is needed and is well used by the community. Don't bow to bureaucrats, represent the Nillumbik residents and protect the open space. I hope my view is heard.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. The next submission is from Rhonda Bain, and that will be read by Councillor Stockman.
Thank you, Chair. Nillumbik Council mentions on the inside cover of the Disability Action Plan, DAP, a quote, "Exclusion hurts, inclusion hurts no one." Based on this, I would like to ask the Council, before making a decision about the preferred VHBA site for a community hospital in Apollo Parkways, give consideration to the needs of approximately 500 people with disabilities who on a daily basis attend services within a short walk from this location. Services include St John of God Diamond Valley Special Development School behind Polytechnic, 10% of TAFE students plus 4 to 5 other groups at Polytechnic. Araloo and support at Chance Cafe, basketball for people with disabilities and the Diamond Valley Library. People with disabilities may have numerous specialist appointments on an ongoing and regular basis, can become quite anxious or overwhelmed with unfamiliar settings and change. A community hospital at the preferred VHBA site could help to minimise stress, be convenient for carers and be a familiar place. A community hospital that will provide a range of public health services on a daily basis with strong links to specialists, community health providers and social support services in a familiar setting could offer many benefits to so many in our community, e.g. mental health, podiatry, diabetes management, physio services would be of enormous value. To build a community hospital on the VHB preferred site is a wonderful opportunity for this council to showcase how inclusion is a high consideration and priority for our community.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. The next submission is from Meghna Baru, and Councillor Egan will read that one out.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. I'm just having trouble with my mouse. Nillumbik, the Green Wedge Shire, will not have a green wedge in this precinct if the sale of this land is allowed by the council. I call upon the respected council members and members of the community to strongly object to this proposed development and unanimously vote to not sell this land to VHBA state government. The council's own assessment of this proposal has found that this area is unsuitable for this development in comparison to the other shortlisted sites. As there is limited public transport, most patients and staff will rely on driving to this location. Traffic and parking congestion in the area and the arterial roads around this area will rise and will diminish the general quality of life that the ratepayers currently enjoy and cherish. A project such as this needs to be in close proximity to a tram line. The Apollo Parkway precinct is already overdeveloped with the shopping mall, TAFE, schools, shire offices, library and the sports centre operating. A hospital in this area is totally going to destroy the delicate balance that currently exists and will change the whole nature and feel of this precinct. This project will be of more benefit to the general public if it were to be located in Eltham, as the name of the hospital suggests. There is currently no hospital that services the residents of that area. However, the residents of Apollo Parkway have access to North Park, Latrobe and Austin hospitals. I also like to object to this sale based on the fact that this proposed development goes against the state government's own Melbourne 2050 plan. Not to mention the sports centre has just been redeveloped with considerable funding, and to demolish this to make way for the hospital will be an absolute travesty and waste of tax and ratepayers' funds. There are other more suitable options that the VHBA can consider that will better serve the community. I would request the council members to consider the above mentioned points during their deliberations and vote against the sale of the parkland, which will forever destroy this area.
Thank you, Councillor Egan. The next submission is from Alexandra Gonos, and that will be read by Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. Alexandra says, I object to the acquisition of council land for the Eltham Area Community Hospital on Civic Drive, Greensboro. My partner and I are a young professional couple who recently bought a property on Corowa Crescent in June 2021. We bought in this area for many reasons, but one is its beautiful open spaces. The hospital will cause additional pressures on the already at capacity roundabout. Traffic will likely run through the numerous local roads north of the proposed hospital location to avoid the roundabout and streets surrounding the hospital, which are full of residential and family homes, which will be used as parking for hospital visitors, patients and staff members. This is not appropriate for the area, especially due to the Apollo Parkways Primary School, which will be located on the same road with no parking for pickups. It will also downgrade the amenity of the park on Civic Drive, which many families visit on a weekly basis. It's clear that around 60% of the community is objecting to the hospital on Civic Drive because it will create chaos on nearby residential streets. There is no train station to support visitors in and out. Thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. The next submission is from Joe Wright, and I will read this one out. As long-term residents of Apollo Parkways, my wife and I would like to register our support for the proposed Eltham Area Community Hospital and would not object to the Nillumbik Council making available the proposed site in Apollo Parkways. We can understand the logic of the hospital's authorities in choosing Apollo Parkways as the site because it offers good road access except during the rush hours and the potential to expand into an extensive bus network. Parking may be a problem, but I am confident that the hospital planners and the council can come up with a solution. We have lived in Apollo Parkways happily for 49 years and seen the estate change in scale from one relatively small and inhabited by essentially young families with children, where the primary requirement was for primary school, to one which is much larger with a full range of demographics and able to justify a community hospital. Certainly, the availability of such a hospital would add to amenities of the area and its appeal to mature home buyers. A secondary consideration would be that there could be local businesses and employment opportunities in both the construction and operation of the hospital. There would be a loss of green space, which would be unfortunate, but we consider that this would have minimal impact. We have over the years enjoyed walking for exercise in Apollo Parkways and still do for about 2 or 3 hours per week. However, apart from going to the sports centre to the bridge, we have never walked in the area designated for the hospital. Seldom, if indeed ever, have we seen other people use the area for recreation. There are many more pleasant walks and areas in the parkway. In summary, we believe that the proposed hospital would increase the amenities of Apollo Parkways, and we would support Nillumbik Council in making the proposed site available to the hospital authorities. And that is the submission from Joe Wright. Now it's 10 o'clock now. Do we need a proposal for the meeting to continue? I'll ask Governor.
10:30, Mr. Chairman. Once you reach 10:30.
When we reach 10:30.
Yes.
Great. Are councillors happy to continue going now?
Yes.
Wonderful. We may well be done by 10:30. The next submission is from Jenny Juknevicius, and that will be read by Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for reading out my submission, which supports the Alpha Area Community Hospital, and I urge all councillors to approve the sale of the proposed land in Apollo Parkways to the VHBA for that purpose. I have been a member of this community for almost 16 years, and one thing Apollo Parkways does not have are any medical facilities. Even the chemist left a long time ago. I ask you to support a community hospital for our Shire and for our local Apollo community. This is an opportunity for us to have the latest medical infrastructure on our doorstep, and one that is funded by the state government at no cost to Nillumbik. The millions of dollars that this site would be worth would be a welcome addition to the Nillumbik's budget. With such a limited rate base in Nillumbik, a major investment into the budget and the resultant improvement to community services is a fantastic opportunity for any council. The medical facilities and services that a community hospital would bring to our community are sorely needed. Breast screen with full disability access, dialysis, chemotherapy, mental health support, drug and alcohol support, to name a few. Nillumbik Youth Council have identified that as part of their youth strategy, mental health is a priority. With the mental health problems created by the COVID-19 pandemic, to have this service within our own community would show that Nillumbik is serious and supportive of its own youth council and youth community engagement. In addition, a community hospital would create many jobs and work experience opportunities for our residents, particularly for our youth. The proposed site of the hospital is surrounded by services for people with disabilities, St John of God, Diamond Valley Specialist Development School, Chances Cafe, supported by Araluan. This is a tremendous opportunity for those services to be supplemented by local medical services. Situating a hospital within the civic precinct where there are no medical services makes sense. Nearby, Melbourne Polytechnic runs a health and human services course, and the hospital would provide convenient industry learning opportunities for those students. Those participating in sport at the Diamond Valley Sports Stadium can benefit from emergency, intermediate treatment in the case of serious injury, as could children utilising the nearby playground. Apollo Parkways is blessed with beautiful reserves and fabulous walking trails. The estate has on their doorstep accessible trails along the Plenty River and within the Plenty Gorge. If you drive the length of the Plenty River Drive, you will see 5 playgrounds, all with walking trails leading to them from within the estate. There are many additional green trails through the middle of the estate. Diamond Valley Reserve is home to an oval, and one of several trails leading from this reserve takes you to a picnic point and look out over the Dandenongs, Bundoora and beyond. We have easy access to the Deep Creek and its native bushland. Sorry, I couldn't finish that all. I tried.
That was a long one. Good job.
Thank you.
We've got the next one is from Gary Skerris. Councillor Payne, I'll ask you to read this one out as well as the one from Ian Doran, because Gary's submission is quite short. So Councillor Payne will read Gary Skerris and Ian Doran's submissions.
Thank you, Chair. From Gary Skerris. Thank you for hearing my submission. Just build it. We need it, Gary. Lovely work, Gary. That's like a haiku. Thank you so much. All right, moving on to Ian Doran. I don't believe this proposal has provided enough detail or adequately considered a number of factors. This submission briefly comments on parking and ongoing use of existing assets in the area. Ideally, a community hospital would be situated within practical walking distance of a public transport hub, say Greensborough Station. The majority attending the hospital may well access it by a private car anyway, but this location, I would suggest, pretty much guarantees almost everyone will practically have to. The area already incorporates the council offices, an expanding public primary school, the library, the recently developed playground, the open air public area, and the just upgraded sports centre. 5 community assets, all of which for enjoyable or practical use require the availability of parking. I've used some of these, and at times parking has been inadequate as it exists now. Not only will the hospital be built over some of the existing parking, it will no doubt require and annex some portion of the remainder, much as the council does now. Significantly less will be available for other users, then pressure comes on harder for restricted areas and zones, policing, etc., and stress when there should be enjoyment. This development should pay its own way in terms of its parking footprint and not degrade the utility and value of the existing Shire assets there, particularly when some of these have been very recently developed at some cost. Alternate sites exist.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. The next submission is from Kwok E. Hatton, and Councillor Perkins will read that one out.
Thank you. The proposed site at Civic Drive for the Eltham Area Hospital is on a border with Banyule Shire, where we are already well served by Austin Hospital in Heidelberg, taking only 15 to 20 minutes by car or train to reach. If this is a hospital for Nillumbik, consider the growing populations of Doreen, Hurstbridge and beyond. Don't the VHB have a duty of care to ensure that residents of the Shire who live further north have access to service by selecting a more central location? Hurstbridge, for example, has plenty of green space next to both a train and bus station, and is central to the Shire. Have the VHBA modelled the supply and demand for these services across the Shire? The Civic Drive choice appears skewed towards the southeast and exclusively for car drivers only.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. And we have one final submission, which is a long one. So I don't know if we'll get through the whole thing, but it's from Robin Yulton, and that will be read by Councillor Stockman.
The proposal of this site makes absolutely no sense at all. There are no parking facilities. There is no public transport to the hospital. Whoever heard of having a hospital of this size and with the intention of expanding it without some form of public transport? Not everyone who visits and or uses a hospital is fully ambulant and or drives their own vehicle. What will happen to the CFA safety zoning? This area is used as an emergency place in the case of bushfire. What about the access for the emergency service and safety of patients and staff? A facility such as a hospital should always have basic safety measures and patient convenience as priorities. None of these have been addressed. The location is absolutely unsuitable and must be considered totally untenable. Public safety is at a risk because of the nature of some of the facilities which the hospital intends to run, i.e. drug, alcohol and mental health clinics, needle exchange, etc. Who will police the activities in the bushland surrounding the hospital? I know from experience in the field that this is an ideal location. I know from experience in this field that this is an ideal location for people with health issues in these areas to use the space for questionable activities. These parklands are zoned recreational. Families with children use the parklands, and people with drug and alcohol problems often indulge in their habits outside before and after appointments. Many of the residents in the parklands have back gates which abut onto the parklands. What happens to their privacy with an increase in pedestrian traffic? What happens to the value of their homes with this hospital right next door, with increases in noise from ambulances arriving to the emergency department? People will seek parking in the estate. There are small streets and cul-de-sacs, courts, and they all have footpath access to the park. These cannot and must not be blocked off if many people bought their homes there because of the access to the beautiful bushland. This has clearly not been planned by people who have given any thought to the location, access, traffic, or the quality of living of existing residents. Governance. No traffic management or modelling produced by the VHBA or Nillumbik Council. The VHBA is only responsible for traffic at the site, not the major access roads, Civic Drive and Roundabout. The Brentwick Drive Roundabout will have to be re-engineered, and road widening will encroach further on parkland. When and who will pay? Ratepayers? We have over the years enjoyed walking for exercise in the Apollo Parkways, and still for about 2 or 3 hours per week. However, apart from going from the sports centre to the bridge, we've never walked in the area designated for the hospital. Is that the same part? No, sorry, I've gone the wrong way. Sorry about that. Austin Health will manage, I think that's time there anyway, is it, Chair?
This time, Councillor Stockman, thank you. That was a long one, so I don't think we were ever going to be able to do the whole thing, but councillors will have a chance to read that in our own time. That concludes all the submissions for the community hospital tonight. I'd like to thank all submitters on behalf of council. That was a huge job. You've really kept us all on our toes, given us a long meeting to get through, but it's been really valuable to hear from you all. I'll now ask for a motion. Councillor Stockman.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to move a motion to support the recommendation that the committee, acting under delegation from council, 1, acknowledges and notes the submissions received from community members on the proposed Eltham Area Community Hospital at Civic Drive, Greensborough. 2, acknowledges the presentations made to the committee. 3, considers the matters contained in the submissions and this report. 4, requests a further report to be presented at the October 2021 council meeting to make a decision on the sale of the land proposed by VHBA for the Eltham Area Community Hospital. And 5, thanks submitters for providing council with feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Egan. Councillor Stockman, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, though, thanks to all the submitters, and obviously there was a lot of them, and it's been a long journey, and obviously we have to have proper consultation. We have to look at both sides, and sometimes it might feel like we're not siding with any particular side, which we shouldn't be. We need to take in everything during consultation, and I think today's consultation was really good. It's great for us to really look at and help guide us as well, but hopefully on that decision in October, later in October, that we get the community, the majority of the community is happy. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Councillor Egan.
Thank you, Councillor Ramcharan. Yes, I'd just like to thank all the submitters, both the ones who came in person and the ones who sent in their written ones, and also all of the people that attended the workshops and the surveys. But as far as any comments go, I'll reserve my comments for when we have to make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Egan. Any other councillors? Councillor Perkins.
Yeah, I'd too also like to thank all the submitters tonight. Look, we heard from 48 people, 20 in person and 28 via written submission. The clear message from tonight definitely is do not sell this land. 20 out of 20, 100% in the personal submissions, those people that spoke to us directly, and 24 out of the 28 who provided a submission for us to read out. That was a total of 48 submissions. 44 out of 48 says no, and that represents 92%. So, certainly from tonight, very, very strong message, but we've got to put that in the context of all the other considerations. We will have a report come to council in 2 weeks' time. I think it's on the 26th. I think it's the 26th. Is that right? 26th of October. So 2 weeks' time, there'll be an officer report. I dare say it'll be a fairly detailed report, going back with a fair bit of history, a lot of the things that council needs to consider and any part has considered. It may answer some of our questions, it may not. It'll provide a recommendation from officers, and councillors will ultimately make a decision on that night whether we resolve in principle to sell the land or to not. But fairly clear message from tonight. That goes without saying, but thanks again to everyone who's made the effort.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors? Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd also like to acknowledge and say thank you to all those residents who put the time in to actually submit to us. And I'd just like to say that I've heard all of the points for the 2 and the 4 and the against, but also to note that we have an ageing population in Illumbik, and we know that, and we've seen that, but we've also got a lot of residents who already travel a long distance, and so having a community hospital that's accessible and within our community is important. Whether this is the right location or not, that will, I guess, will come out from the report that we're also hearing in a couple of weeks, but also through the consultation that we've heard through the council run one. So that's really all I want to say at this stage, is that I'm open to hearing from community if anyone wants to contact me via email or phone. But I think that everyone's submitted through the consultation through council, and we're hearing from everyone that way. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Any other councillors? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. I'd like to echo those words and thank the community for taking the effort to let us know their opinions on this. There's been 2 lots of consultation that people have been able to go through, one with the state government directly and then one with us about this particular parcel of land. So, this is a big decision for us as a council, and, listening to what the community have got to say is really important to me. And, it's been very great. It's been great to hear the various points that people had to raise tonight. And I thank them for their passion, for standing up for their community and for the reasons that they live here, and just expressing that to us. And I think I will just leave it at that for now. So yeah, thank you again to everybody for taking the time to put pen to paper or to speak with us tonight, to be able to speak your words. It's really important for us to hear from you directly. And as Councillor Eyre has mentioned, I'm very happy to have people contact me directly as well if they haven't already.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Payne, would you like to speak? No. I'll just speak briefly myself. Look, I'd like to thank everybody who came tonight, and also everybody who wrote written submissions and filled out our surveys. I did read through it all, and my head was spinning, and I felt quite fuzzy afterwards. It took quite a long time. And I think it was interesting that all but one of the written submissions, not the ones tonight, but the written submissions that we received before tonight, all but one were against the hospital. There were over 300 pages of hard copy submissions, which seemed much more balanced, but I think there was still more opposed than in favour. But then the survey results vastly opposed the hospital. The cons that people listed included issues like parking and traffic, the imposition on local facilities, the proximity to the school and the safety of children, especially dealing with traffic, the loss of open space, and the issues with no public transport. There were also some submissions that unfortunately referenced the issue of people with mental health and people who struggle with addiction being treated at that hospital. I haven't seen any evidence that the hospital will offer addiction facilities, but to be honest, I think that's irrelevant, and I think it's, to be honest, it is a shame that that some people have chosen to stigmatize people with mental health issues and people with addiction. I think that when you get to that point, it does become NIMBYism rather than talking about our community values and the fact that we value public open space in Nillumbik. So I'm not interested in that argument, but the other arguments that were made against the hospital, I think, are all really valid, and they're questions that VHBA needs to answer. And I'll certainly be seeking an answer to those questions before we vote in 2 weeks' time, because I won't feel comfortable selling this land if we can't make sure that the impacts on the community are minimised. There were some people who wrote submissions in favour of the hospital. I think they overwhelmingly agreed with the people opposed to it that it would be good to have a hospital. But I think that maybe that it wasn't really acknowledged in those submissions that the hospital doesn't belong here, but could go somewhere else nearby. Although people did point to the fact that it'll create jobs, it'll help revitalise the local area, possibly could help revitalise the local shop. It would be accessible for locals. So there are pros to having the hospital there. But I think the question for councillors will be, do those pros outweigh the cons? And look, can I just make one request to the community on this one? This can't become a divide and conquer thing. It's not about the hospital could go in one place or it could go in another. It's not about pushing the hospital onto another community who don't want it. One of my really strongly held values as a councillor and a member of the Nillumbik community is public open space and amenity and community facilities. And we all need to unite on that front and work together to make sure this hospital ends up in a place where it's appropriate. I have gone over time because I wasn't able to see the timer when I had my speaking notes in front of me, so sorry for that, everyone. All right, I will put the motion to a vote. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. That brings us to the end of our meeting. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you to all of the submitters, many of whom are still listening in now, who've been here all night listening to us. I hope you found it interesting. And I'll close the meeting now at 10:21. Thank you.